Imagine waking up to your life collapsing in seconds, accused, humiliated, and betrayed by the very people you once trusted. This story pulls you into a chilling journey where family love turns into manipulation and loyalty becomes a weapon. As the truth unfolds, one question lingers: how far can betrayal go before it destroys everything?
At 6:47 in the morning, my front door exploded open. An officer yelled, "Hands up," as two guns pointed straight at me. They were arresting me for a terrible hit and run, a charge that would destroy my career, my reputation, and my future. Miles away, my sister and parents were likely celebrating. They believed their 90-day plan had succeeded, and I was headed to prison for her crime. The handcuffs bit into my wrists, but they overlooked one very important detail, and that one thing was about to bring their entire world crashing down. I am so glad you are here listening. I truly appreciate it. Let me ask you something. Where are you tuning in from? And if your own sibling framed you for a crime, what would you feel first? Would it be shock, anger, or pure disbelief? Let me know in the comments. Please note, this story includes fictional details for dramatic effect and to make a point. If any names or places seem familiar, it is only a coincidence. But the lesson about defending yourself from a toxic family is absolutely real. Let us begin. Officer Stevens did not feel the need to knock. My apartment door shuddered with three loud metallic bangs at exactly 6:47 in the morning. That was not a neighbor, it was not a package delivery, it was the sound of someone who does not require an invitation. I was pouring my first cup of coffee when my world turned upside down. The coffee pot froze in my hand as my brain struggled to catch up. Outside my windows, the rainy street was still dark. The Austin skyline was a faint silhouette in the morning mist. It was the Austin police. My hand trembled and coffee splashed onto the counter. I set the coffee pot down. My heart began to pound in my chest. I was only wearing an old University of Texas t-shirt and pajama pants. My bare feet were silent on the hardwood floor as I moved toward the entrance. I managed to call out, "I am coming." The instant I touched the doorknob, the door was thrown open. Three officers charged into my living room. Two Glock 22 handguns were aimed right at my heart. "Hands, let me see your hands." I immediately raised my hands, palms facing forward. The lead officer was young, maybe 30, with a military-style haircut and a tense expression. His name tag read Stevens. Behind him, two other officers swept the room. They kept their weapons raised, expecting a confrontation. "Reagan Sutton?" Stevens's voice was cold as steel. "Yes." "What is this all about?" "You are under arrest for attempted murder." The words made no sense at all. Attempted murder? It was like he was speaking a completely different language. It felt like a terrible nightmare I could not escape from. "What? You have the wrong person. I have not—" "Turn around! Hands behind your back!" Stevens gave me no time to process. He seized my arm, spun me around against the counter, and yanked my arms behind me. The cold metal stung my skin. The handcuffs clicked shut. The sound was deafening in my quiet apartment. "You have the right to remain silent." Stevens' hot breath was on my neck. "Anything you say can be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you. Do you understand these rights?" "Yes, but I did nothing wrong. What attempted murder? I was home all night." "Save it for the detective." He took my arm and pulled me toward the open doorway. My neighbors were all peeking out. Mrs. Miller from apartment 4B had her hand over her mouth. Marcus from across the hall was filming with his phone. This was a humiliating walk of shame. I was being publicly judged before I was even processed. Stevens marched me down the hallway, past the out-of-order elevator and into the stairwell. My bare feet were cold on the rough concrete as we went down 3 floors. I tried to absorb every detail. Stevens's firm grip, the blinking red light on his partner's body camera, the way they treated me like I was dangerous. The thought sent a chill through my entire body. We emerged into the parking garage. A police cruiser was waiting, its exhaust visible in the humid air. Stevens pulled open the back door. A heavy wire screen divided the front and back seats. He pressed my head down as I slid inside. The door slammed shut with a final, echoing thud. I was trapped in a police car. The hard plastic seat was awful. The handcuffs were digging in and my shoulders were already aching. Through the screen, I watched Stevens use his radio. "Suspect is in custody. We are heading to the central station." Suspect, that is who I was now. I shut my eyes and focused on taking slow breaths. Attempted murder. Who, when, where? I was in my apartment the entire night. I had a video conference at 10 o'clock at night with clients in Singapore. I streamed a movie on Netflix. I fell asleep right on my sofa. I woke up at 6:30 and started making coffee. There was no missing time, no blackouts, no unexplained hours. That meant either this was a terrible mistake or someone was framing me. Stevens got behind the wheel. The other two officers got into a separate car. Through the windshield, I saw the garage door rise, revealing a gray morning sky. The city of Austin was slowly coming to life. People were jogging along the river trail. A food truck was setting up for the day. A man was walking his dog. Everything was so normal, but inside this car, my life was being torn apart. The car turned onto Cesar Chavez Street, heading downtown. I watched my apartment building get smaller in the side mirror. All of my evidence was back there. My laptop, my phone, the files that would prove my innocence. They did not even let me get my wallet. My mind raced. You do not get arrested for attempted murder unless there is a victim. Someone was hurt, and the police were convinced I was responsible. As I looked at the golden morning skyline, one single thought cut through the confusion. Whoever set me up made a huge miscalculation. They think I am weak. They are about to learn just how wrong they are. They have no idea who they are dealing with. They do not know what I do. I work in cybersecurity. I'm a professional problem solver. I find the vulnerabilities in complex computer systems. I trace the digital footprints that people believe they have erased, and I will find the person who is trying to destroy my life. Our car entered the Interstate 35 highway where morning traffic was building up. The police radio crackled with codes and language I did not understand. I saw my own reflection in the window glass. My hair was a complete mess. I was in my old University of Texas shirt, and the handcuffs were glinting. I looked exactly like the criminal they thought I was. But I am not. I reviewed the facts again. Last night, a 9 o'clock video call. I can prove that with cloud recordings and timestamps. My Singapore clients could be my witnesses. At 10 o'clock, I watched Netflix. I fell asleep. I woke up at 6:30. My alibi was rock solid. So why am I in handcuffs? The answer hit me like a ton of bricks. It is because someone wants me in this exact position. Someone planned all of this. Someone knew exactly how to make me look guilty. The only questions were who and why. Stevens exited the highway and drove toward the downtown area. Through the window, I could see the Travis County Courthouse. The police station was just beyond it. It was a square concrete building that looked like every government office from the 1970s. It was functional and cold, a place where human lives are processed like paperwork. My stomach tightened into a knot. This was not a bad dream. This was my reality. In 15 minutes, I would be booked, fingerprinted, and photographed. I would be entered into the system as if I were already a criminal. But I will not let myself panic. Panicking is a waste of energy. I will stay completely calm. I will use every skill I have, and I will prove that I was framed. Because that is what this is, a frame up. It was a setup so perfectly arranged that the Austin Police Department showed up at my home with guns drawn, positive they had their suspect. Someone knew exactly what they were doing. They were clever. They had to be someone close enough to understand my daily routine, my habits, my life. That thought sent an icy chill down my back. Stevens pulled into the station's underground parking area. The harsh fluorescent lights overhead flickered to life. He stopped the car and killed the engine. The silence was heavy and suffocating. This was it. He opened my door and helped me get out. His touch was almost gentle, as if the earlier aggression had faded. I stood there in my bare feet and pajamas, hands cuffed behind me as he radioed our arrival. "The detective will see you in about an hour," Stevens said, his voice much softer now. "First, you have to be processed." I could only nod. I did not trust my voice. As he guided me toward the station's heavy steel door, I made a silent vow to myself. I will find out who did this. I will prove my innocence, and I will make the person who tried to ruin my life regret every single moment of this nightmare. I did not realize it then, but the one who orchestrated my downfall was someone I had spent my entire childhood protecting. The 15-minute drive to the Austin police station felt like an eternity. My wrists were already turning a dark shade of purple. With every bump Stevens hit on Cesar Chavez Street, the handcuffs bit deeper into my wrists. I shifted on the hard plastic seat, but there was nowhere to go. I watched the city blur past the wire screen. Taco stands on 6th Street were just firing up their grills. Joggers darted across intersections. People were simply living their lives. Just a little while ago, I was one of them. The police radio squawked to life. Unit 47, the victim is stable and in the intensive care unit at Del Seaton. Her husband, a detective with major crimes, is with her. My stomach dropped. A victim. Someone was hurt and her husband was a cop. Stevens met my eyes in the rearview mirror. "You hear that?" A detective's wife and their kid? He paused. You picked the wrong family to mess with. I didn't do it, I breathed. He ignored me. We turned onto 8th Street. The station was a concrete fortress with barred windows. Inside the garage, fluorescent lights hummed over our heads. Stevens guided me through a steel door into a hallway that reeked of disinfectant. The booking room was a wide space with a long counter. A woman in her 50s sat behind it. Her nameplate read Martinez. She never looked up from her screen. Name? She asked, her voice flat. Reagan Sutton, Stevens answered for me. Martinez typed with one finger at a time. Date of birth? Stevens rattled off my personal information, reducing me to a series of data points. Charges are attempted murder, aggravated assault, felony hit and run, and child endangerment. Child endangerment? A 7-year-old? Martinez finally looked at me, her face a mask of contempt. Fingerprints! A technician rolled each of my fingers across a glass scanner. Next came the mugshot, with its harsh light and stark white wall. They had me hold a board with my name and a long string of numbers. My pockets were already turned out. I had no phone, no wallet, just the thin pajamas I was wearing. Cell 3, Officer Martinez told Stevens. He led me down a hall past other cells. I saw one man asleep and heard a woman crying softly. The air was thick with the smell of sweat and fear. Cell 3 was a concrete box. Stevens unlocked the cuffs and gestured me inside. The detective will see you when he's ready, he said. The heavy door clanged shut, the sound echoing in the small space. I sat on the cold metal bench, feeling the walls press in. The room was maybe 8 feet by 10 feet. It had no windows, only the constant buzz of the overhead light. Jennifer Pfizer. The name from the police report echoed in my mind. Why did it seem familiar? I went through a mental list of clients, co-workers, and acquaintances, but came up with nothing. I did not know any Jennifer Pfizer, and then it hit me. Detective Robert Pfizer of the Major Crimes Unit. I knew his name from a major case that had been all over the news. The victim was his wife, and their daughter was with them. A cold wave of dread washed over me. If the woman I supposedly hit was a detective's wife, the entire Austin Police Department would be coming for me. My alibi wouldn't stand a chance. Cops look out for their own, and I was now the enemy. I had to ignore the fear and focus on the facts. Last night at 9 o'clock, I was in a video meeting with my team in Singapore. Marcus Taylor and Patricia Reed were both on the call. The whole meeting was recorded to the cloud, complete with video evidence and timestamps. It was my absolute proof of innocence. So what was I doing in a jail cell? I heard approaching footsteps. A woman in a business blazer, a detective's badge on her belt, stopped outside my cell. She looked to be in her 40s, with tired eyes and short brown hair. Miss Sutton, she said, someone has posted your bail. I could only stare at her, completely baffled. What? Your father's lawyer, Gregory Palmer, is waiting. The bond was set at $500,000. 500,000? My father? A chill went through me. I hadn't made a single phone call. I had only been arrested an hour ago. How could he possibly know? I didn't call him, I said. She simply shrugged. He called us, said he heard what happened. She unlocked the door. You're free to go. Your arraignment is Friday. Who called him? I asked again. I have no idea. A neighbor, perhaps. She pointed me down the hall. Mr. Palmer is waiting for you in there. A neighbor called my dad at 7 in the morning, and my father, who I hadn't spoken with in 3 months, hired Austin's top lawyer and posted $500,000. She led me into a small room where a man in an expensive suit stood up. He had silver hair and an air of professional calm that radiated confidence. Miss Sutton, he said smoothly. Gregory Palmer, your father retained my services this morning. I met his gaze. How did my father know I was here? Mr. Palmer's smile didn't reach his eyes. Bad news has a way of traveling fast. This involves a detective's family. I was picked up at my home at 7 in the morning. It's not public news yet. Your father has influential friends, he said. Let us get you home. I need to know how he knew. Miss Sutton, his voice turned sharp. You are facing 4 felony counts, including the attempted murder of a police officer's wife and child. The prosecutor will push for the maximum sentence. Our focus should be on your defense, not on your father's methods. My phone, which Martinez had just given back, vibrated on the table. 47 missed calls lit up the screen. There were texts from my father, Wallace, telling me to stay calm and meet him at his house in Westlake. A text from my mother, Margaret, read, Paige is devastated. Come home. I read her message one more time. Paige is devastated. My sister. Why would she be devastated? She had no way of knowing I was arrested. I hadn't told anyone. Miss Sutton, Palmer said, his eyes fixed on me. I need to go to my apartment, I told him. I have to get my laptop and sort this out. Your father requested a family meeting at his estate. Tell him I will be there this evening. I need my things first. Palmer's jaw tightened. Your father was quite specific. I was just as determined. And I am insisting on going to my own home. I stood up. Thank you for arranging the bail. I will be in touch. I walked out of the room before he could object. The morning sun felt blinding after the dim station. It was September in Austin, and the air was already thick with heat. Standing on the courthouse steps, I was out of jail, but I was far from free, and I knew with chilling certainty that something was very, very wrong. My father knew about my arrest almost the second it happened. My mother's message said my sister Paige was a mess, but Paige should not have known a thing. I pulled out my phone and opened my home security camera app. I had to see the footage from last night. I had to know what happened while I was sleeping. The app finished loading and my blood ran cold. Someone had accessed my account at 3:14 in the morning. The login came from an internet address I recognized immediately. It was from Westlake Hills, right where my parents lived. Gregory Palmer was exactly the kind of lawyer my father would hire. He had an expensive suit and emotionless eyes. The air conditioner in the little room was blasting, and I was shivering in my pajamas, feeling the bruises on my wrists. Palmer looked like he belonged on a corporate board, a man who smelled like old money. That is what he was. A man hired to make big problems disappear. Your father contacted me at 7 o'clock this morning, he said, sliding a file across the table. Your bail was $500,000. It has been paid. You are free to go. I stared at the file without moving to touch it. How did he know? Palmer offered a practiced smile. Word gets around in Austin, especially when a detective's family is involved. I was arrested at 7. I have been in custody for less than 2 hours. This is not on the news. Your father has his sources. Sources that told him I was arrested at my apartment at 6:47 in the morning. I leaned forward. He knew before anyone outside this police station knew. Palmer's smile finally vanished. I am not certain how your father received his information, he said. The important thing is that he took action to get you released. Why? The word hung in the air between us. Palmer studied me. Because you are his daughter. I haven't spoken to him in 3 months. Family is still family, Miss Sutton? Palmer at last opened the file. Now, we need to form a strategy. You are facing 4 very serious charges: attempted murder, assault with a deadly weapon, felony hit and run, and child endangerment. The district attorney will show no mercy. The victim is the wife of Detective Robert Pfizer. Their 7-year-old daughter was in the car with her. My stomach twisted into a knot. A 7-year-old girl. I did not do this. That is what we must prove. But as of now, the evidence is against you. He pulled out a sheet of paper. They recovered your driver's license at the scene of the crash. An anonymous 911 caller reported seeing you flee. We have to establish your alibi, find witnesses, and challenge the evidence. What 911 call? Palmer glanced at his notes. The call was placed at 9:27 at night. The caller described a woman matching your appearance running from the corner of Lamar and 6th. 9:27. That was only 10 minutes after the accident. Who made the call? It was anonymous, he replied. That is the problem. My head was swimming. An anonymous tip is impossible to trace. It was made by someone who wanted to stay hidden. Someone who... Miss Sutton. Palmer was watching me intently. Do you have an alibi for last night? Yes, I was on a video call with clients in Singapore. It was from 9 to 10 o'clock in the evening. The entire call was recorded with both video and timestamps. After we hung up, I was completely alone in my apartment. Could anyone verify you were there after 10? I told him no. He said that created a window of opportunity. Palmer jotted something down on his notepad. The crash happened at 9:14. He said if my video call started at 9, then I was visible on camera. That helps your case a lot. We can work with that. I was on screen for the entire hour. I did not leave my home once. We are going to need that recording, he told me. We also have to figure out how your license ended up at the crash site. I opened my mouth to say something, but then I stopped. How could my license be there? I was sure I had lost it 2 months ago. I need my laptop, I said. All of my work is on it back at my place. Palmer simply nodded. Your father wants you to come to his house first. He is holding a family meeting. The way he said it so matter-of-fact made my blood run cold. How would my father even know what I needed? I am so sorry, I said. Did you say he wants me at the house? Is that a message from him? Palmer's expression was unreadable. Your father is concerned for you. He wants to make sure you are safe and everyone is on the same side. Please tell him I will be there tonight, I said. I have to go home and understand this whole situation first. Palmer's jaw tightened. Your father was very specific. He wants you in Westlake immediately. The way he said wants made it sound like a command. I stood up from my chair. Thank you for handling the bail money. I will be in contact with you. Miss Sutton, I strongly advise you to. I will call you later. I walked out before he could finish his argument. The clerk behind the counter handed me my belongings in a big brown envelope. Inside were my phone, my wallet, and my keys. My phone had no power left. I had to ask to use a charger and then wait 10 minutes for it to finally power on. The moment it came on, my screen was flooded with notifications. I saw 47 missed calls. I had text messages from people I knew and some I did not recognize. I began scrolling through the list. My father, Wallace, had sent a message. Be calm. Do not talk to anyone. Get to Westlake. He had sent that at 7:14 in the morning, only 30 minutes after they arrested me. My mother, Margaret, had texted, Paige is a wreck. Come home. That one was sent at 7:22. I stared at her text for a very long time. Paige is a wreck. My sister, my 28-year-old sister, who still lives with our parents and organizes weddings for wealthy people. We had not spoken since July. How could she possibly be heartbroken? She did not even know I had been arrested. I had not told a single person, but maybe she somehow knew. I continued to scroll. My father had sent several more messages. My mother's business partner was asking if I was all right. A few of my colleagues from Securet Solutions had also sent texts. How did all of these people find out? I signed the release papers without even looking at them and walked out of the station. The September sun was painfully bright. The Austin heat hit me like a physical force. The air was heavy with that summer dampness that makes you sweat without moving. The courthouse steps were empty, aside from a man smoking and a woman shouting into her phone. Just normal people with normal lives. I had been released, but I was not truly free. I opened my phone to place a call. I needed to call my boss. I had to explain that my arrest for attempted murder was a terrible misunderstanding. But before that, I had to figure out what actually took place last night. I launched my apartment's security application. My login gave me access to the cameras in the hallway and the lobby. If someone had approached my door, I would see it on the video. The application took forever to load on the station's terrible Wi-Fi. Then the sign-in page appeared. The last access was at 3:14 in the morning on September 17th, 2024. The IP address was 198.51.100.47, my parents' home in Westlake Hills. Somebody had logged into my security from their estate 12 miles away, just 4 hours before I was arrested. My hands began to tremble. Wallace and Margaret lived at 1847 Westlake Drive. I knew that IP address because I had set up their entire home network 5 years before. Someone in my own family had spied on my security cameras in the dead of night. They were either watching my every move or erasing the evidence. I glanced back at the police station, then looked down at my phone. I saw my father's messages demanding that I come home. And in that moment, I understood. This was not a misunderstanding, this was a setup. My apartment felt wrong the moment I stepped inside. The one place I always felt safe now felt like a crime scene. My minimalist furniture and the big windows facing the lake had always brought me peace. Nothing had been moved, but that was exactly the issue. Everything was precisely how I had left it 2 hours earlier. That was right before 3 police officers broke down my door and led me out in handcuffs. The coffee machine was still powered on. My mug of now cold coffee was sitting on the counter. My laptop was open on my table, the screen dark from being asleep. I locked the door behind me, using every single bolt, and leaned against it, trying to calm my breathing. I had to think clearly. My father was waiting for me to arrive in about 6 hours. That meant I had 6 hours to figure out what was happening, 6 hours to discover who had stolen my identity and framed me for this horrible crime. I set my phone down on the counter and woke my laptop from sleep mode. The screen instantly lit up. My password was already saved and my internet tabs were still open from the night before. I could see my work dashboard and a client video conference from Singapore. A report I was preparing for a Dallas company was only partially done. Everything looked perfectly ordinary, but it was not ordinary at all. I opened a new browser window to access my personal security system. I had built it myself 3 years ago. It watched everything: motion detectors, door locks, and live camera feeds. The whole apartment was secured and encrypted. I navigated to the previous night, September 16th. At 9 in the evening, the front door had been locked. My smart home tracked my every move. At 9:02 p.m., my Zoom call began. The meeting was over by 10:14 p.m. My kitchen sensor went off next. I logged into Netflix at 10:47 p.m. The bedroom lights turned off at 11:32 p.m. and back on at 6:30 a.m. This digital footprint proved I was home all night. But the police weren't interested in my perfect alibi. They only cared about a driver's license found at a hit and run. It was my license. I shut my laptop and walked to my bedroom. My wallet sat on the nightstand exactly where I always leave it. I picked it up and looked inside. My credit cards were there, along with my work ID and a $20 bill. But the slot for my driver's license was empty. I could only stare at the vacant plastic window. When was the last time I saw it? I sat on my bed trying to remember. I almost never drive my car. The Austin traffic is a nightmare, and everything I need is nearby. My Tesla just collects dust in the garage. I last drove weeks ago. No, that is not right. It was at the gym. My heart began to pound. It was 2 months ago, near the end of July. I visited a gym in Westlake Hills, close to my parents' house. I was in town for a family thing I could not recall. It might have been for a birthday dinner. I remember taking my gym bag with my clothes and wallet inside. I placed it all in a locker and went to a 45-minute spin class. After I showered, I headed out. I never glanced inside my wallet since I had no reason to. I simply threw it in my bag and drove home. A sick feeling grew in my stomach. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through my photos, going all the way back to July. I found a picture from July 21st. It showed me and my sister Paige at our parents' massive home. She was smiling in a white sundress. I was still in my workout clothes. The photo was taken at 11:47 a.m. In the background, my gym bag was sitting open on a chair. I felt the blood drain from my face. Paige was there with me that morning. We had brunch after I exercised. She had helped me carry my stuff into the house. It would have been so easy for her to reach into my bag and take my license. I collapsed back on the bed, staring at the photo. But Paige was my sister. I knew she was spoiled and selfish, maybe even a little self-absorbed, but she was not a criminal. She would never steal my license to frame me, or would she? I recalled a text from my mother that morning. She said Paige was falling apart and that I had to come home. Why was she falling apart? I looked through my messages but saw nothing from Paige. We had not messaged each other since early August. We had a brief exchange about her engagement party. I had told her I would not be there. She sent back a passive aggressive emoji. That was the last I had heard from her. It felt pretty normal for our relationship. Paige and I were never really close, but this felt like more than a lack of closeness. This felt like deliberate sabotage. I opened my laptop and pulled up my building's security log one more time. At 3:14 a.m. on September 17th, someone logged in remotely. The IP address was from Westlake Hills, Texas. The person used an administrator code to gain access. Whoever it was knew the exact time to check my security system. They knew I would have a solid alibi for the crime. They knew I would be at home, and they still called the police on me. I stood up and slid my phone into my pocket. I was done waiting for my father to handle this. I was driving to Westlake right now to find out what my family had done. The drive to Westlake Hills felt like I was crossing into enemy lines. I chose the longer scenic route through the city. The sun was going down, painting the sky in gorgeous shades of orange and pink. It was a beautiful Texas evening. I just stared at the road ahead. By the time I reached the Westlake gate, my hands were steady, but my heart was pounding in my chest. I punched in the gate code. It was my birthday, a code we had used for 15 years. The huge iron gate slowly swung open. The house at 1847 Westlake Drive was at the end of a long private road. It was a three-story mansion with large white columns and a circular driveway. It looked like a place owned by a family with old money, but my father bought it just 12 years ago after his company became successful. Every single window in the house was glowing with light. I parked my car behind my mother's and took a second to breathe. I told myself to keep my composure. I took a deep breath, grabbed my phone, and stepped out of the car. The front door opened before I even had a chance to knock. My father, Wallace Sutton, stood in the doorway with his arms crossed. He was 61 years old, with silver hair and a crisp navy suit. "It is about time you got here," he said. "We need to talk." I walked past him without a word. The foyer was unchanged. It had the same white marble floors and a giant crystal chandelier. A huge painting of the Texas hills covered one wall. The house smelled like lavender and money. My mother, Margaret, appeared from the kitchen. She looked smaller than I remembered, with her perfectly styled blonde hair and a pristine linen blouse. She hurried over to me. "Oh, Reagan, my dear, this is just awful. Are you okay?" I stepped back so she could not touch me. "How did you know I was arrested?" My father's jaw tightened. "Gregory called me. Now, come and sit down." "We need to form a plan," he stated. He then turned and walked into the living room, assuming I would follow him. Margaret paused for a second before going after him. I remained in the foyer looking around the house. It had never really felt like my home, even after all the years I lived there. It was always my father's house, run by his rules and paid for by his money. I finally walked into the living room. Wallace was sitting in his leather armchair holding a glass of scotch. That was his chair, and no one else was ever allowed to sit in it. Margaret sat nervously on the very edge of the sofa. They both looked at me as if I were a problem that they needed to solve. I sat in a chair across from them and folded my arms. Wallace began to speak. Gregory says their case against you is flimsy. All they have is your driver's license and an anonymous tip. We can beat this. I just looked at him. An anonymous tip? What kind of tip? My mother's hands twisted nervously in her lap. Someone called 911. They reported seeing a woman who looked like you running away from the accident. I asked, who was the caller? My father's voice grew sharp. It was anonymous. That is the definition of the word. I stared directly at him. He was lying. I could tell by the way he gripped his glass. I could tell by the way my mother would not meet my eyes. They knew exactly who made that call. Before I could speak again, I heard footsteps coming from the kitchen. Reagan? Paige was standing in the doorway. Her eyes were wide and her mascara was running. She was wearing a big cashmere sweater and yoga pants. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a messy bun. It was clear she had been crying for a very long time. She rushed toward me with her arms outstretched. I stood perfectly still, making no move toward her. Paige stopped about a foot away, her smile disappearing. Oh my gosh, are you okay? Her voice was trembling. I just cannot believe this is happening. Jennifer Fisher is best friends with my wedding planner. This is just so horrible. I became very calm and quiet. Your wedding planner knows Jennifer. Paige blinked. Well, Austin is a small town. Everyone knows everyone, you know? I studied her face carefully. The tears looked genuine. Her eyes were red and her cheeks were puffy. But something was not right. Her hands were shaking, but her eyes were sharp and clear. She was not falling apart. She was acting. Paige, I said slowly, where were you last night at 9:14? The room became completely silent. Wallace slammed his glass down on the table. What on earth kind of question is that? I kept my eyes locked on Paige. It is a very simple question. Where were you? Paige's mouth opened and closed a few times. I I was here, at home with Mom and Dad. We had dinner. I shifted my gaze to Margaret. Is that true? Yes, she said very quickly, a little too quickly. Yes, we all had dinner right here. What did you have for dinner? Margaret hesitated. I made chicken, roasted chicken. What time? 7, Wallace cut in. We ate at 7 o'clock. Paige was here all night. What are you implying, Reagan? I slowly rose from my chair. Paige took a small step backward. I am not implying anything, I said. I am asking questions because somebody used my driver's license to destroy a woman's life last night. Somebody logged into my apartment's security system at 3 in the morning from this house, and somebody called 911 to make sure I would be the one to take the fall. That is completely ridiculous, Wallace started to say. Is it? I stared at Paige. Is it really? My eyes dropped to her left hand. It was bandaged. White gauze was wrapped around her knuckles and secured with medical tape. What happened to your hand? I asked. Paige looked down at it, then quickly shoved her hands into her sweater pockets. It is nothing. I cut it while I was cooking. When? Yesterday? Was it before or after 9:14? Reagan, that is enough. Wallace was on his feet now, his voice like a clap of thunder. You are upset, you are scared, but you will not come into my house and accuse your own sister. I need to use the bathroom. No one moved a muscle. Upstairs, I said. Wallace's jaw was set like stone. After a long moment, he gave a short nod. I left the living room, walked up the familiar staircase, and turned left at the top. But I did not go into the bathroom. I went into Paige's bedroom. What I was about to find in there would change all of our lives forever. Paige's childhood room had not changed at all. It still had the same pale pink walls, the same air of effortless wealth hung in the room like a very expensive perfume. I closed the door silently behind me and stood completely still, listening. I could hear Wallace's sharp tone from downstairs, followed by my mother's gentle replies. Then I heard glasses clinking together. Perfect. They believed I was in the bathroom. I scanned the bedroom. It had a large bed with a neat white comforter and perfectly arranged pillows. The vanity table was cluttered with expensive creams, serums, and jade rollers. Through the half-open closet door, I saw designer purses displayed on shelves like museum pieces. Next to the window, a laptop sat on a desk, its screen dark but for a tiny, glowing power light. It was asleep. I crossed the room in 3 fast strides and touched the mousepad. The screen flickered to life instantly. There was no password, just a clean, bright desktop. The background was a professional photo from an engagement shoot. Paige smiled at the camera in a white lace dress. Her hand rested on the chest of a man in his 30s with dark hair, a fancy watch, and a confident look. I did not recognize him. I examined the icons at the bottom of the screen: Safari, Messages, Instagram, a calendar, and 7 open web pages. I leaned in for a closer look. The first few pages were what you would expect: a wedding venue in Fredericksburg, a Pinterest board named Fall Wedding Ideas. A Saks Fifth Avenue shopping cart held 3 bridesmaid dresses. It was all normal wedding planning. Just as I was about to close the laptop, I noticed the very last browser tab. It was labeled Private Browsing. My hand froze above the trackpad. I clicked it. A list of websites appeared on the screen. It was the browsing history from a private session. It looked like one page was still open. As I scrolled down the list, my blood ran cold. September 14th, 2024 at 11:47 at night. How to anonymously report a hit and run in Austin. September 14th, 2024 at 11:52 at night. Do police verify alibis from family members? September 15th, 2024 at 12:03 in the morning. Austin Police non-emergency phone number. September 15th, 2024 at 12:18 in the morning. How long for a forensic analysis? September 16th, 2024 at 3:47 in the afternoon. Can police recover deleted text messages? September 16th, 2024 at 8:52 at night. What is the penalty for leaving an accident scene in Texas? I could only stare at the words. My heart pounded in my chest. Paige had been researching this for days, long before the accident. She looked up how to secretly report a crime, how to get away with it, and how to frame an innocent person. And on the night of the accident, she did exactly that. My hands trembled as I grabbed my phone and opened the camera. I snapped 3 quick photos, one of the whole screen and 2 close-ups of the search history. I closed the web browser and put the laptop back to sleep, making the screen go dark. I stepped away from the desk, my breathing heavy. I knew I needed more proof. The browser history was not enough. A clever lawyer would dismiss it as simple curiosity. They could argue Paige was writing a crime story or some other unbelievable tale. I needed something solid. I walked to the vanity and opened the top drawer. It was filled with makeup brushes, lipsticks, and false eyelashes. In the second drawer, I saw tangled jewelry and a blue Tiffany box. I pulled open the third drawer and I stopped cold. Tucked in the back, beneath a stack of old birthday cards, was a small black notebook. I picked it up. The cover was completely plain. There was no title. It was just an inexpensive spiral notebook, the kind you might use for a grocery list. When I opened it, my stomach dropped. The first page was dated July 29th, 2024, day 1, slipped R's driver's license out of her gym bag. She didn't notice a thing. I'm keeping it in my car for when I need it. I flipped the page. Day 18, looked up Austin police procedures. They always arrest the person whose identification is found at the scene. They don't second guess an anonymous tip. Day 32, found the perfect target. Jennifer Fisher, a detective's wife. This is smart. If I hit a cop's wife, they will investigate hard. Reagan won't stand a chance. Day 47, did a practice run. Drove past 4th and Elm at 9:15 at night. The street is really dark. No cameras. The target always walks her dog there at that time. Day 60, engagement party is this weekend. Reagan isn't coming. Good. She is already pulling away from the family. That makes it easier to destroy her. Day 75. Only 1 week left. I have everything ready: the license, the car, the plan. Reagan's perfect little world is about to fall apart, and I will finally be the daughter they are proud of. I felt like I could not get any air. My vision started to blur. Paige did not just steal my license. She planned this for months. She followed Jennifer Fisher. She practiced the route. She researched how to frame me piece by piece like it was a school assignment, as if I were just an obstacle to be removed. I heard footsteps approaching in the hall. I shoved the notebook back into the drawer, closed it quietly, and stood up just as the door swung open. Paige stood in the doorway, her eyes narrowed with suspicion. Reagan, what are you doing in my room? I made my expression blank, trying to look exhausted and overwhelmed. Yes, I just needed a minute to myself. It has been a really hard day. Paige walked in, her gaze sweeping across the room. She looked at the desk, the closet, and then the vanity. Why my room? The other bathroom was taken, I said. I just needed somewhere quiet. Her eyes lingered on the desk and the laptop for a second. Then she turned back to me. You should go home, she said, her voice softening. You need to rest. This has been so difficult. I nodded. Yeah, I think you are right. I headed for the door, but Paige grabbed my wrist. You believe me, don't you? Her voice trembled. and fresh tears welled up in her eyes. That I was right here with mom and dad. You do believe me? I glanced down at her hand, at her knuckles. They were covered in fresh scrapes. The skin was red and raw, as if it was just beginning to heal. It was the kind of injury an airbag causes when it forces your hands into the steering wheel. I looked up and met her gaze directly. Of course I believe you, I told her. You are my sister. A look of relief washed over her face and she let go of my arm. I left the room, went down the stairs, and walked right past Wallace and Margaret in the living room. I did not bother saying goodbye. I walked out the front door, climbed into my car, and drove away. But I did not go home. I pulled over 2 blocks from the house. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. I took out my phone. 3 facts were now perfectly clear. 1. Paige had researched how to frame someone for a serious crime weeks before it happened. 2. She had fresh injuries on her hands that looked like they were from a car's airbag. And 3. My parents were covering for her. But the biggest question remained unanswered. I could not understand why Paige had been plotting to ruin me for so long. I did not sleep that night. By 6 in the morning, I was in my office at home. 3 monitors lit up the dark room as I searched for any digital clue I could find. The photos from Paige's room were on the left screen. I studied the browser searches, dates, and times. The middle screen was a command terminal, blinking and waiting. On the right, I started a timeline in a spreadsheet. July 21st, my driver's license vanished from my gym bag. July 29th, day 1 of Paige's journal. September 14th through the 16th, she searched online for how to frame a person for a hit and run. The accident happened on September 16th at 9:14 at night. I was arrested on September 17th at 6:47 in the morning. But there were huge holes in the official story. A browser history and a diary were not enough. I needed solid proof to show in court. Proof that could defeat the expensive lawyers Wallace was sure to hire. I leaned back in my chair, drank some cold coffee, and stared at the ceiling. Suddenly, a memory came back to me. 5 years ago, my mother had me set up their iCloud family sharing plan. She wanted an easy way to share photos and calendars. I spent an entire afternoon connecting all of their accounts. Since I had set it up, I was still the family administrator. That meant I had access to their devices. I sat up straight, opened a new window, and went to the iCloud login page. I entered the family admin password. The main page loaded, showing the 4 accounts for my family. I clicked on Paige's name. A list of her registered devices appeared: an iPhone 14 Pro, a MacBook Pro, and an iPad Air. All of them were currently online. All were backing up their information. A small smile formed on my lips. Let's find out what you've been hiding, little sister. I selected the iPhone backup from 2 days ago, September 16th, the day of the crash. The 6 GB download began. I poured another cup of coffee and waited. The progress bar crept forward. It reached 90%. Then it was complete. I opened the file using a special data recovery program I use for my job. The software showed me everything from her phone, her texts, photos, application data, call logs, and location history. I chose to look at her messages first. The program had recovered a few deleted conversations. I clicked on the first one. It was a text conversation between Paige and a phone number I did not know. The area code was 214, which was for Dallas. I scrolled all the way to the top of the chat history. The first message was from July 15th, 2024. The text said, "Have what you requested, $500, Bitcoin only." Paige had responded, "How can I be sure it is legitimate?" The unknown contact replied, "It will scan properly. I used it before, never had an issue." The awful truth hit me like a ton of bricks. She had bought a fake identification card. I kept reading. On July 28th, Paige asked if it would be accepted at bars. The seller confirmed it would, but then warned her that a single DUI would be the end of it. My hands tightened on the arms of my chair. DUI. She had actually planned to cause a drunk driving crash. She was going to use my driver's license to escape the consequences. She had even planned ahead enough to have a backup identity. I took a photo of the screen with my phone and saved it in my evidence folder. Next, I examined her financial information. Paige's Venmo was linked to the family's iCloud account, giving me access to all her transactions. I went back to the middle of July to the 15th. I located a payment of $500 to a user named Alex M. The description for the payment read, "Appreciate the referral." I searched for that username and found an Alex Martinez, a 32-year-old man from Dallas. Then a security tool I use for my job found his name on the dark web. I discovered Alex Martinez's name on shady websites that dealt in fake identities, untraceable phones, and forged papers. He was clearly a skilled professional, not some amateur. Paige had sent him $500 using a fake Venmo payment to disguise the transfer. I continued to dig. I accessed Paige's Coinbase account, which she had linked to our family's main account years ago to trade crypto. I checked her transaction history. On July 15th, 2024, she purchased $500 of Bitcoin. That exact amount was then sent to an anonymous digital wallet. While the wallet was untraceable, the date and time were an exact match. She had acquired the Bitcoin on the same day she paid Alex Martinez. She had been methodical from the start. I added the Coinbase records to my growing collection of proof. Next, I pulled up her credit card records. The purchases were mostly ordinary things like cosmetics, new outfits, and yoga sessions. However, one specific charge caught my attention. On August 10th, 2024, she paid $200 to a company called Inside Surveillance LLC. A quick search revealed it was a private investigation agency in South Austin, known for being expensive and very private. My pulse quickened. Why would she need a private detective? Was she having me watched or following Jennifer Fisher to map out my schedule and secure her alibi? I opened a new browser tab and looked for the firm's official site. The firm's website described services like subject tracking and analyzing a person's daily life patterns. They had all the resources needed to destroy a person's life and make it seem like a terrible accident. I leaned back, finding it hard to breathe. This was not a drunken mistake. It was not a frantic effort to hide the truth. Paige had been orchestrating this for 2 months, possibly longer. She got a fake license. She researched how to frame me. She hired a professional investigator. She covered her tracks using cash and Bitcoin. She even rehearsed the driving route. She selected her target, and she documented it all in a notebook as if it were a business proposal. My phone buzzed on the desk. It was a message from Wallace asking if I wanted to talk. I did not reply. I was not ready to speak to him, not before I had all the proof. My focus returned to the computer screens. The iCloud backup was still active. I sifted through the remaining files, examining pictures, notes, and calendar events. That is when I found it. A folder on her iPad was named Journal Private. Its last modification was September 16th, 2024, at 11:32 at night, just before my arrest. My hand hovered over the mouse. I knew that journal would confirm my deepest fear. Paige had not just set me up. She had written it all down, every detail, every decision, every moment she chose to ruin me. I clicked on the folder and started to read. But wait, before I reveal what is inside the journal detailing Paige's 90-day plan to destroy me, I want you to make a prediction. Comment with a number 1 if you believe she acted alone. Comment with a 2 if you suspect my parents were involved, or comment with a 3 if you think this situation gets even crazier. Because I am about to share more than just evidence, it is her entire strategy. Day 1 was jealousy. Day 47 was victim chosen. Day 89 was goodbye, big sister. She listed everything like a project plan, so organized and proud. I should mention, this story has been changed slightly for educational purposes. If you are sensitive to themes of deep betrayal, this might not be for you. But if you want to see the moment I discovered my own sister had planned my ruin for 3 months, please continue watching. This journal exposes the complete truth. Its contents will reshape how you view family loyalty. I brewed a fresh pot of coffee, sensing it would be a long night. The journal contained 90 days of entries. I sat back down, the document displayed on my monitor, and began to scroll. The first entry was dated June 18th, 2024. That was a full 3 months, an entire season before the crash. I took a slow breath and began. Day 1, dinner tonight. Dad talked endlessly about Reagan getting a promotion, 178,000 a year, Reagan. Reagan made director at 33. I am so sick of hearing her name. I organize weddings for the super rich, but my dad pretends I am unemployed. I am tired of being second best. I stared at the words, unable to believe them. This was all about envy. It was pure envy. My promotion, my income, my whole life. That is all it took for her to want to tear it all down. I can still picture that dinner on June 18th. Wallace pushed me to go for a celebration. Paige was all smiles that night, giving me hugs and telling me how proud she was. But she was secretly hating my guts the entire time. I read the next part. Day 15. I have a plan. Reagan thinks she is so smart with that cybersecurity career. She will never see this coming. First, I have to get her driver's license. Then, I need to find the ideal victim. It must be someone who will make the police so furious they will not bother to check for an alibi. My hands started to tremble. The ideal victim. She picked Jennifer deliberately. This was not a random choice. It was a calculated move. She had planned for 2 weeks how to ruin me. She figured the key was finding a victim whose life would make the police too emotional to investigate properly. I scrolled down more, day 28. Reagan works out at the Westlake gym every Wednesday morning. She is so predictable. I will just happen to see her tomorrow. I will snatch her license when she's in the shower. I shut my eyes. July 12th, I remember being at the gym. She sent me a text. I am near mom's house. Want to have brunch after you finish? I was so genuinely happy to hear from her. We had a nice chat and I left my gym bag unzipped when I went to take a shower. When I returned, Paige had vanished and so had my license. I continued to scroll, my stomach churning. Day 35, I have it. Reagan's license is mine. She has no idea it is even missing. So foolish. Now I just need to locate the right person to hit. So foolish. She wrote that word about me, her own sister, the sister who had always stood up for her and kept her safe for 30 years. My only foolish mistake was trusting her. I forced my eyes to the next entry. Day 40. I saw Reagan at her usual coffee shop today. She seemed so content. That joy will not last much longer. My blood ran cold. July 20th, Cosmic Coffee on South Congress. I remember feeling like someone's eyes were on me that afternoon, but when I scanned the street, it looked completely deserted. It was not deserted. Paige was there watching me, already imagining my entire world coming apart. Day 47. I have found her. Detective Robert Fisher's wife, Jennifer. As a pediatric nurse, she is the perfect blameless target. She heads home from the hospital on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 9 in the evening. Her route takes her right through Lamar and 6th. And this is the brilliant part. When a cop's family member is harmed, the whole force goes into overdrive. They will arrest the person whose ID is at the scene and figure out the details later. Reagan will never have a chance to prove she was somewhere else. A sick feeling washed over me. She had picked a detective's wife with chilling, methodical purpose. She knew the police would act fast out of anger and a need to protect their own without double checking my story. She used the whole justice system as a tool to hurt me. I kept reading. The journal entries grew more precise and orderly. Day 52. I contacted a private investigator in South Austin. It cost $200 for a full report on Jennifer Fisher's daily routine. It was money well spent. She paid someone to tail Jennifer just to map out her schedule. This was more than just jealousy. This was a full blown operation. Day 60. The engagement party is this weekend. Reagan is not attending. Excellent. She is already creating distance from the family. That will make it so much easier to ruin her. August 10th. I had skipped her party. I said I had to work late. I believed I was just avoiding family drama. I had no idea I was helping her set me up. Day 68. I purchased a fake ID from a guy in Dallas. It cost $500 in Bitcoin. It is scannable, so if a cop pulls me over before the incident, I can present this one. Reagan's license stays perfect until it is time to use it. She had thought of everything: a fake identity, untraceable money, and contingency plans. This was no emotional outburst. It was a cold, professional hit. Day 75. I did a test run last night. I drove Dad's Range Rover through that same intersection drunk at 9:15. I saw no police cruisers and no traffic cameras. The timing is absolutely flawless. Jennifer's car passes through at that exact moment every night. I had to look away from the screen. My vision was starting to blur. She had rehearsed it. She had driven drunk on purpose just to check the plan, to make sure she could get away with it, and to perfect the timing. This was not a horrible mistake. This was not a desperate effort to cover something up. This was a rehearsal. September 2nd, I was in my apartment that evening working. 12 miles from there, my sister was rehearsing the destruction of my life. I made myself read on. Day 82. I told mom about the plan. She cried for a minute, but then dad had a talk with her. He said, Reagan has always been a handful. She always thought she was so much better than us. He also said this whole thing will teach her some humility. Mom agreed to place the anonymous 911 call. She will use a burner phone and claim she saw someone who looked like Reagan fleeing the scene. It is a perfect plan. I felt something break inside of me. My own mother had agreed to this. She cried, but she went along with it because Wallace convinced her. They both felt I had it coming. I was a problem because I refused to let Wallace control my career choices. I was a problem because I became independent at 25 and did not ask for his help. For that, he decided a prison sentence would teach me a lesson. With tears blurring my sight, I scrolled to the final entries. Day 89, September 16th, the night before my arrest. Everything is set for tomorrow evening. I will strike Jennifer's car around 9:17. Reagan will be in her pointless Zoom call, a solid alibi that will not matter at all. I will leave her license on the driver's seat. Mom will phone 911 with an anonymous tip. By sunrise, Reagan will be sitting in a jail cell. She will lose her career, her reputation, and her liberty. At last, she will know how it feels to have nothing. And I will finally become the good daughter, the one dad is proud of. So long, big sister. I could not breathe. The words swam on the screen. She wanted to annihilate me completely, not just frame me, but obliterate me. She planned to take away everything I had worked for and watch me suffer, and she wrote it all down as if it were a simple to do list. So long, big sister, like I was already dead to her. I sat back feeling totally numb. 90 days. It took her 90 days to plot my downfall. But there was one more entry from just this morning, September 18th, only a few hours ago. I opened it. Day 90. Reagan is out on bail. She is likely at her apartment now trying to figure out what happened. Let her try. Even if she suspects me, she has no proof. By the time she finds anything, taking a plea deal will look like her best option. Mom and Dad are handling the lawyer. The plan is working perfectly. I checked the time. 6:47 in the morning. That was the very moment I had started my own search. Paige did not know I had discovered her journal. She did not know I had accessed her iCloud. She was unaware that I had screenshots of her web searches, her money transfers, her Bitcoin buys, and her messages with the ID forger. She thought she was untouchable. She thought the game was over. That was about to become her biggest mistake. I closed my laptop and just sat in the silence of my apartment. My coffee had gone cold. The sun was higher in the sky, its light flooding my apartment, but I was not paying attention. I had the evidence. I had everything. Internet history, financial statements, text messages, and a 90-day journal detailing every part of her plot to frame me for attempted murder. But I was not sure what to do next. I could not simply walk into the police station and show them everything. Paige would claim I faked it. Wallace would hire a powerful legal team to bury it. Margaret would lie to a judge. And I had accessed the journal through our shared family iCloud. It was not illegal, but Palmer would call it hacking. Any defense attorney would argue the evidence was tainted and inadmissible. I needed more than proof. I needed a plan. I stood up, dumped the cold coffee, and stared out at the Austin skyline. Somewhere out there, Paige was going about her day planning weddings and texting friends, pretending to be worried about me. She did not know I had her diary. She had no idea I had just spent 6 hours tracing every dollar, every deleted message, and every single lie. She thought I was still in the dark, still lost, still the naive older sister who trusted her completely. And she had no idea that I was coming for her. I needed help, not from my family's lawyer, but from someone who cared about the truth. I looked at my phone for a moment, then I found the main number for the Austin Police Department. My thumb hesitated right over the call button. This single phone call would alter everything. My family would find out I had moved against them. Paige would realize I was fighting back. But then I pictured Jennifer Fisher lying in a hospital bed and her 7-year-old daughter who had a concussion. I thought about the 90 days of planning, 90 days of calculated plotting, and 90 days of my sister thinking I deserved to have my life taken away. I pressed the button. The phone rang just 2 times before a dispatcher picked up. Austin Police Department, how can I help you? I need to speak with the detective assigned to my case, I said. My name is Reagan Sutton. I was taken into custody 2 days ago for attempted murder. My case number is 47921. There was a brief pause, followed by the sound of typing. That case is with Detective Bradley. Major crimes. One moment, please. The call switched to hold music. I stood there waiting, my heart pounding in my chest. Then a man's voice, deep and tired, came on. This is Bradley. I said, Detective, my name is Reagan Sutton. I am the woman arrested for the hit and run involving Jennifer Pfizer. I am aware of who you are, Miss Sutton. This is not the correct procedure. You should be going through your lawyer. I have evidence that I was framed, I said. My sister is the one who did it, and I need 1 hour of your time. Silence followed. Then he replied, Your lawyer told me you might try this. Desperation does not look good in court, Miss Sutton. I have her journal, I said. It has 90 days of entries. She documented the entire plan, including her reasons for choosing your partner's wife as the target. The silence on the other end of the line lasted much longer this time. When Bradley finally spoke again, his tone was sharp. Be at the station, 2 in the afternoon, and come alone. I arrived at the main police station at 1:55 in the afternoon. In my hands were my laptop and a USB drive with encrypted files of everything I had discovered. Bradley was waiting for me inside the lobby. He was a large man in his late 40s with salt and pepper hair and sharp blue eyes that seemed to have seen everything. He wore a white button-down shirt with rolled-up sleeves and a detective's shield on his belt. He offered no handshake. He just said, "Follow me." He led me through several long corridors to a small interview room. The room had no windows, only a table, 4 chairs, and a security camera in the corner. He gestured to a chair. You've got 30 minutes, convince me. I placed my laptop on the table and opened the journal file. This is my sister Paige's personal journal. I accessed it legally. I manage our family's iCloud account set up 5 years ago. My access has never been revoked. I turned the laptop so he could read the screen. This entry is from day 47, July 30th, 2024. Bradley leaned forward, reading the text without saying a word. I found her. Detective Robert Pfizer's wife, Jennifer. She is a pediatric nurse, a completely harmless target. Her route home from the hospital is the same every Tuesday and Thursday at 9 o'clock at night, right past Lamar and 6th Street. And here is the clever part. When a cop's family is hurt, the whole department reacts intensely. They will arrest whoever's ID is at the scene and sort it out later. Reagan will not have a chance to prove her innocence. His face became a mask of stone. He instructed me, continue. I scrolled down to day 89, which was September 16th, the night before I was arrested. Everything is set for tomorrow evening. I plan to strike Jennifer's vehicle around 9:17. Reagan will be in her ridiculous Zoom meeting. It is a flawless alibi that will ultimately mean nothing. I will place her license on the driver's seat. Mom is going to call 911 with an anonymous tip. In the morning, Reagan will be sitting in a jail cell. Bradley reread that entry twice. He then leaned back, folding his arms across his chest. This indicates it was all arranged beforehand. But how do I know you did not simply create this yourself? I was prepared for this question. You can check the file's information. The entries were recorded on the precise dates and times shown. Next, look at Paige's device activity. She accessed this file the day before the collision. I can show you the iCloud history. I opened a separate window on the laptop. There is even more. A Venmo transfer to a person in Dallas who creates fake identification. A Bitcoin transaction was made on that same day, and I found text messages discussing the purchase of a driver's license. I repositioned the laptop to face him once more. Bradley leaned in, his jaw tight. He examined the Venmo transactions, the Coinbase ledger, and the deleted messages I had restored. After he finished, he looked up at me. You also claim an alibi that we did not verify. Why was that? Because you arrested me without even asking. I was in a Zoom conference with a client from Singapore between 9 and 10 p.m. on the night of the incident. The whole meeting is recorded, time-stamped, and stored online. I can provide you with the link right now. Bradley's eyes narrowed. Why did your attorney not present this to us? Because my father's attorney is not working to establish my innocence, I replied. He is working to shield Paige. Bradley stood and crossed to the far side of the room. He remained there in silence for a very long time. Finally, he turned back to me. If what you are saying is true, this is far bigger than a hit and run. This is a criminal conspiracy. It involves attempted murder and obstruction of justice. Are your parents involved in this? My mother placed the anonymous 911 call, I stated. She was at their property in Westlake Hills, which is a full 8 miles from the crash site. Can you verify that? Examine the cell tower records for that 911 call. You will find it there. Bradley just looked at me. He then pulled out his phone and made a call. Fisher, this is Bradley. I need you in conference room B. 2 minutes later, the door swung open and Detective Robert Fisher entered. He was younger than Bradley, perhaps in his early 50s, with dark circles beneath his eyes and a wedding ring on his finger. His gaze fell on me and his expression hardened. Detective Fisher, I said very softly, I am deeply sorry about your wife and daughter, but I was not responsible for this, and I have the evidence. Bradley gestured to the laptop. Read day 47. Fisher leaned over the display. I watched his face change from confusion to disbelief and then to absolute fury. He read the entire entry twice. He then looked at Bradley. Is this authentic? The metadata is sound, Bradley confirmed. The cloud history confirms it, and she has financial data, text messages, and an alibi that we never bothered to check. Fisher turned to me, and his voice shook with emotion. Your sister did this on purpose. She chose my wife. Yes, I replied, because she understood that would force the department into swift action. She counted on all of you being too distraught to investigate my side of events. Fisher's hands clenched into tight fists. He turned to Bradley. I am removing myself from this case. It is now a conflict of interest, but you need to bring her in immediately. Bradley nodded his head. I concur, but we will follow procedure to the letter. He looked at me. Miss Sutton, if I move ahead with this, it will mean investigating your entire family. Your sister could be charged with attempted murder. Your parents could be charged with conspiracy and obstruction of justice. Are you ready for that? I recalled what Paige had written in her journal. Goodbye, big sister. I pictured Jennifer Fisher lying in the hospital and her 7-year-old daughter's injury. I considered 90 days of scheming, 90 days of bitterness, and 90 days of plotting my complete ruin. I looked directly at Bradley. I am prepared. But I must request one thing before we proceed. Bradley was waiting. I want to be the one who questions Paige, officially and for the record. That same evening, Bradley set up the arrangements. I was seated opposite him in the very room where I had presented my evidence. I saw him dial Paige's number and activate the speakerphone. My hands were folded in my lap, but my heart was racing. This is the strategy Bradley had explained 20 minutes earlier. We are inviting her to come in as a witness, not a person of interest. She will not feel the need for a lawyer. You will be present as the victim who is asking for her assistance. She will assume she is coming to reinforce your story. And we will be recording. I had confirmed every last word. A two-way mirror with full audio and video. If she makes an admission, it can be used in court. Bradley had leaned in a little closer. But Reagan, you are not permitted to coerce a confession from her. No threats, no promises. You simply present the evidence and allow her to speak. Can you handle that? I had met his gaze directly. I have spent my whole life protecting Paige from the results of her choices. Tomorrow, I will not protect her any longer. As the phone rang, Bradley's voice became smooth and professional. Miss Sutton, my name is Detective James Bradley with the Austin Police Department. I am phoning you regarding the accident which involved Jennifer Fisher. Paige's voice came through the speaker, sounding cautious. Yes, how can I be of assistance? We understand that you are Reagan Sutton's sister. We were hoping you might come in tomorrow morning to act as a witness, to help us verify Reagan's typical routines and confirm her alibi. There was a brief pause, then Paige's voice turned softer, filled with relief. Of course. I will do anything to help my sister. Reagan did not do this. 9 a.m. tomorrow at the Central Station. You will not require an attorney. This is just a witness statement. I will be there, Paige affirmed. The call ended. Bradley glanced over at me. She sounded relieved. She believes she is coming to help you convict me, I said quietly. Good. Let her think that right up to the moment she sees you. Over the next hour, Bradley instructed me on interrogation techniques. We sat across from each other at the table. He used a notepad while I had my laptop open to Paige's journal. Begin slowly, he coached me. Establish a rapport first, then introduce the evidence piece by piece. Do not reveal everything at once. Let her ensnare herself. What if she lies? She is going to lie. Allow her to. Each lie will make it more difficult to refute the truth later on. He motioned to the notepad. Observe the small changes in her expression. When Paige touches her nose, it signals a lie. If she glances up and to her right, she is inventing information. If she pulls back, she is creating distance from her own guilt. And what if she attempts to get up and walk out? She is not under arrest, so from a technical standpoint, she is free to go. But individuals like her enjoy talking. If you provide the chance, she will talk her way into a trap. I nodded, trying to absorb it all. Bradley stood up. Go home. Make an effort to get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a very long day. I did not go directly home. I stopped at a coffee shop on South Congress and purchased a black coffee that I did not drink. I simply sat by the window and observed the city life. I saw couples walking hand in hand and tourists taking photos in front of the wall art. Just regular people leading regular lives. I remembered Paige as an 8-year-old, sobbing after she fell off her bike and scraped her knee. I had carried her inside, cleaned the wound, and put a bandage with cartoons on it. Ray, you will always be here to look after me, right? She had asked. Always, I had assured her. I remembered Paige at 16, after she was caught shoplifting a designer bracelet from a department store. I convinced the store manager not to contact the police, paid for the bracelet myself, and we drove home in complete silence. She never even offered an apology. I remembered Paige at 23 when she had to borrow $5,000 for her rent. I transferred the money to her that very day. She never repaid me and I never mentioned it, because that is the job of an older sister. They protect, they make sacrifices, they offer love without expecting anything in return. And for that, Paige had dedicated 90 days to orchestrating my downfall. It was past midnight by the time I arrived home. I could not sleep. I sat at my desk and read Paige's journal one more time, memorizing particular phrases. Day 47. If I strike the wife of a police officer, they will dedicate every resource. Day 75. I performed a trial run last night. Day 89. Goodbye, big sister. I stood before my bathroom mirror, practicing the words until they were devoid of emotion. Paige, did you take my driver's license again? Paige, did you take my driver's license again? By 3 a.m., I had repeated it 50 times. By 5 a.m., I was simply staring at the ceiling, waiting for the alarm to sound. At 6 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was a message from Paige. The police asked me to come in this morning to give a statement for you. I am so nervous. What should I say? I stared at the screen. She was asking me for guidance. She wanted my assistance to destroy me. I typed my response very slowly. Just be truthful, Paige. That is all any of us can do. I hit send. Three pulsing dots appeared, disappeared, and then reappeared. At last, her message came. Okay, I love you, sis. I set my phone down and closed my eyes. In just 3 hours, Paige would walk into the Austin Police Department, fully expecting to clear her name. She had no idea she was walking directly into an ambush, and I, her own sister, was the one setting the trap. I arrived at the station at 8:30 in the morning. Bradley met me in the hallway outside the interrogation room. This was a different room from my last visit, smaller, with a bolted down metal table and a single chair on each side. A camera was mounted in the corner. A large two-way mirror took up most of one wall. Fisher is on the other side of that glass, Bradley said quietly. He wants to witness this himself. I gave a slight nod. The audio and video are recording. I will bring her in when she gets here. You will already be sitting at the table. I am going to introduce you as the victim who is here to prove you are innocent. I will tell her you requested to speak with her directly, then I will exit the room. And what if she asks why I am here? Just tell her you wanted to thank her for coming to support your story. Put her at ease. I looked toward the two-way mirror. I could not see Fisher, but I felt his presence, watching and waiting. He was waiting for the person who harmed his wife to walk into this room and confess. What if she denies everything? I asked. Bradley's expression was grim. In that case, we will have to build the case the hard way. We will get subpoenas, warrants, and run forensics. But if she confesses, he trailed off. Then she is ours, I said, completing his thought. She is ours. At 8:55 in the morning, a voice came over Bradley's radio. The person of interest is in the lobby. He turned to me. Are you prepared for this? I thought about the last 90 days. I thought about Jennifer Fisher lying in a hospital bed. I thought about the text message Paige sent to me this morning. I love you, sis. I sat down in the chair that was facing the door. I am prepared. The interrogation room felt much colder than I remembered it, or perhaps it was just my own nerves. I sat there perfectly still, my hands folded on the table, and I did not take my eyes off the door. At 9 in the morning exactly, the door opened wide. Officer Stevens, the same officer who had put me in handcuffs 3 days ago, led Paige into the room. She was wearing a cream-colored sweater with jeans and flat shoes. Her hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail. She looked calm, like she was on her way to lunch, not a police interrogation. But then her eyes met mine, and all the color drained from her face. Reagan, I was told I was coming here to provide a witness statement. My voice was steady and quiet. Sit down, Paige. She hesitated, glancing over at Detective Stevens. He gestured toward the chair opposite me, then he exited the room, shutting the door behind him. Paige lowered herself slowly into the chair. Her eyes jumped from me to the one-way mirror and then back to me. What are you doing here? Should you not have a lawyer? This is not about me, I told her. This is all about you. Paige gave a nervous chuckle. What did the detective have to say? He is looking for the truth, and I intend to help him get it. Her eyes quickly moved to the mirror once more. I do not get it. You will. I opened the folder on the table and pulled out the first page, a screenshot of her browser history. I slid it in her direction. Paige, did you search for how to report a hit and run anonymously on August 20th? She simply stared at the paper. The color drained from her face. That is from my own computer. How did you manage that? Just respond to my question. Her mouth was slightly open. I believe I was doing research for a customer. Wedding planners sometimes. I slid another page across the table. What about looking up if the police checked the alibis of family members? Was that for a wedding customer as well? Paige's fingers dug into the table's edge. You searched my personal computer. That is against the law. I merely used our shared family cloud storage. As the person in charge, I can legally see everything on it. Paige's jaw tensed, but she did not speak. I leaned a bit closer. Paige, did you take my driver's license? She stayed quiet. No, why would I ever do a thing like that? Let us talk about July 12th on a Wednesday morning at the Lifetime Fitness in Westlake. You were present. I was only seeing Mom, who is not far from there. You were there because I am always there on Wednesdays. You were familiar with my schedule. I passed another paper to her, a gym record that showed we both entered 15 minutes apart. I left my locker open for 5 minutes to take a work call. When I came back, my license was gone. Paige saw the gym log. That does not prove a thing. Where is your license right now, Paige? Her hand began to reach for her handbag. Do not even try, I said. I am sure you have yours because the one they found in the Range Rover belonged to me. Paige's hand froze. She clutched her purse on her lap and her fingers were trembling. For the very first time, she seemed genuinely terrified. This is not real. You are trying to frame me, Reagan. I am your sister. Are you really? I cut her off. My voice was quiet but sharp. Sisters do not scheme for 3 months to put each other in jail. Paige froze. What in the world are you talking about? I reached into the folder one last time. This time I revealed the journal. All 90 days of it, printed out with dates and key parts highlighted. I laid them on the table one after another like a card player showing a winning hand. Paige's eyes widened with pure shock. What are all those? Let me tell you a short story, Paige. The title is Day 1, My Plan to Destroy My Sister. I lifted the top page and started to read. Day 1, June 18th. Dinner was this evening. Dad could not stop boasting about Reagan's new promotion. $78,000 a year. Reagan, a director at 33. Reagan this, Reagan that. I am so sick of hearing her name. I plan events that cost millions, and Dad acts like I am unemployed. I am done with being number two. My sister Paige thinks she is so brilliant with her plans, but she never imagined this. She planned to get my driver's license first. Then she needed the perfect target, someone who would make the police so angry they would never check for an alibi. Paige just shook her head. Stop, she said. Where did that come from? It came from your journal. Day 28, July 11th. Reagan goes to the gym in Westlake every Wednesday morning. She is so predictable. I will just happen to be there tomorrow. I will take her license when she is showering. I looked up from the page. You did see me, Paige. You hugged me. You said you missed me. And then you took my license. I did not, she insisted. Day 35, July 18th. Success. I have Reagan's license. She has not noticed it is gone. She is so clueless. My voice shook on the last word, but I kept going. Day 47, July 30th. I found her. Detective Robert Fisher's wife, Jennifer. A pediatric nurse, the perfect innocent victim. And here is the genius part. When an officer's family gets hurt, the whole police force goes crazy. They will arrest the person whose ID is at the scene and deal with the details later. Reagan will never get a chance to prove her innocence. Paige was breathing hard. You hacked my private files. This will not be allowed in court. Day 75, September 2nd. I did a test run last night. I drove Dad's Range Rover drunk through the intersection at 9:15. I saw no cops, no cameras. The timing is perfect. I put the page down and looked at her. You practiced it, Paige. You drove drunk on purpose just to make sure you could do it. Tears were streaming down her cheeks, but I did not stop. Day 82, September 9th. I told Mom about my idea. She was unhappy at first, but Dad convinced her. He said this would teach Reagan some humility. Mom then agreed she would make the anonymous 911 call. Paige's voice was shaky. Reagan, please stop reading. Day 89, September 16th. Tomorrow is the big night. Everything is ready. I will hit Jennifer's car around 9:17. I will leave Reagan's license on the driver's seat. Mom will call 911 with an anonymous tip. By morning, Reagan will be in a jail cell. She will lose her job, her reputation, and her freedom. She will finally know how it feels to have absolutely nothing, and I will be the favorite daughter. Goodbye, my dear sister. I set the last page on the table. The only noise in the room was Paige's ragged breathing. She stared at the papers in front of her, her hands shaking. I can explain, she whispered. Can you? I leaned back in my chair. Because I am listening, Paige. Explain how you spent 90 days plotting to ruin my life. Explain how you followed Jennifer Fisher. Explain how you practiced driving drunk to crash into her car at the perfect time. Explain why you chose a detective's wife. You knew the police would be too upset to look at my alibi. Paige opened her mouth, but nothing came out. On the other side of the one-way mirror, I knew Bradley was there, recording every single word, every expression, every lie Paige had told, and every truth she was about to tell. Go on, I said softly. Explain what you did. Before Paige confesses, what do you think she will say? Is she guilty? In just 60 seconds, she is going to break. The journal, the web searches, the lies, everything will come out, and the words she screams at me next, I wanted you to suffer, will decide her future in court. Please note this story is fictional and created for entertainment. Any resemblance to real people or events is accidental. But if you want to see the moment my sister's rage ruins her, stay right here. This is the confession that changes it all. Paige's mouth opened, then it shut, then it opened again. I did not do it. Her voice faded, her hands were trembling. You have no idea what those searches were about. I was researching for a blog I write on true crime cases. I hear a lot of podcasts, Paige. My voice was completely calm. The journal. Tell me about the journal. Her face began to fall apart. You went into my private documents. That is illegal, Reagan. You cannot use that as evidence against me. It is a shared family computer account, I told her. It is perfectly legal. I am the one who manages the account. I have had access for 5 years. You agreed to the rules when Mom set it up. But those are just my personal thoughts. Her voice grew louder and more desperate. You cannot use them. They were only ideas. I never did. I pushed the final piece of evidence across the table. It was a police photo of the Range Rover from the crash, a black luxury vehicle. The front of it was totally destroyed. The airbags were out. This vehicle is registered to Dad's investment company. You have permission to drive it. The crash happened at 9:17 at night. My video work call was recorded from 9 until 10. I was not the one driving. I looked directly at her, but you were. Paige looked at the photo. Her breathing became short and fast. She jumped up from her chair, and it screeched against the floor. You think you are just so smart. Her voice was sharp and cruel. I did not even blink. Paige hit the table with both of her hands. You have always been the perfect child. It was always Reagan this, Reagan that, Reagan's grades, Reagan's job, Reagan's perfect life. So you decided to destroy it? I asked her quietly. Yes, she screamed, and tears made lines through her makeup. I wanted you to feel pain. I wanted you to finally understand what it is like to lose everything, to be nobody. I leaned a little closer. Did you choose Jennifer Fisher for a reason? Paige's laugh was wild and scary. I did not care if that detective's wife was hurt. She was just an unfortunate part of the plan. This was all about you, about making you pay for being better than I am. The room was completely quiet. Paige was out of breath, her chest moving up and down very fast. I kept my voice calm. So you are admitting it? You caused that crash? You put my license there? You tried to frame me for it? Paige's face went completely pale. She realized what she had just said. Wait, no, that is not what I was saying. I knocked on the one-way mirror 2 times. The door opened immediately. Detective Bradley walked into the room and he was holding handcuffs. Paige moved away from the table. No, please, just wait. Bradley's voice was calm and serious. Paige Sutton, you are now under arrest for the crime of attempted murder and for aggravated assault with a vehicle, conspiracy to commit a crime, and obstruction of justice. He moved to stand behind her. She looked at me, her eyes wide with fear. Reagan, please help me. I am your sister. Bradley locked her hands behind her back. The metal handcuffs made a loud clicking noise. I stood up, walked over to her, and looked her straight in the eye. You stopped being my sister 90 days ago. Bradley read her the legal warnings as he led her away. You have the right to be silent. Anything you say can be used against you in a court. The detective read my sister her rights while she cried out my name. Reagan, Reagan, I am so sorry. But then the door closed, and I was all by myself in that quiet room. All of the proof was in front of me, the car photograph, the internet history, the gym schedule. It took me 3 full days to collect it all, 3 days to build a case that would destroy my sister's life, just like she tried to destroy mine. I thought I would feel happy, but I just felt empty inside. I later found out the terrible truth. My sister had done something like this before, and the victim was still hurting. The door opened slowly, and Detective Bradley came back in. He looked very tired. He said I had done very well. He told me her confession was clear and would be used in court. I just nodded my head. I could not speak. Bradley sat down across from me. He said that Paige was a flight risk and a danger to others, so she would not get bail. The prosecutor would file charges for attempted murder, assault, and many other crimes. She could be in prison for at least 20 years. I finally was able to speak and asked about my parents. He told me they were being brought in for questioning that afternoon. My mother was the one who made the fake emergency call, and my father assisted her. Phone location proved my mother was 8 miles away from the accident at 9:24 that evening. She made the call from the Westlake area exactly as I thought. I closed my eyes tightly. Bradley kept talking, saying Jennifer, the wife of the man my sister targeted, was stable and would get better. Her daughter Emma had a concussion but was going to be fine. Both of them would testify against Paige. He stopped and then looked right at me. You saved them, Reagan. Paige never would have stopped. People like her do not know how to stop. I looked back at him. She will not stop now, even if she is in a prison cell. Bradley's face got very serious. Then we will work to make sure she stays in there for a very, very long time. As he got up to go, he turned around. He said when they looked into Paige's past, something else came up. An old case from 2 years ago about a woman named Rachel Murphy. She was accused of taking $85,000 from her company. That single accusation took everything from her. She lost her position, her reputation, and her entire future. She now has 3 low-wage jobs just to make ends meet. A sick feeling started to build in my gut. I asked what any of this had to do with my sister. Bradley told me that Rachel and Paige had been co-workers. The proof used against Rachel was completely fake. It was planted, and the one who pretended to uncover the crime was my sister Paige. The room began to feel like it was spinning. Paige had set her up. He confirmed that was their belief. Rachel had always maintained her innocence, but the investigation went nowhere. Bradley set a business card on the table. It had Rachel Murphy's name printed on it. She was living in East Austin and was employed at a coffee shop. He said I ought to go and speak with her. The instant he was gone, I took the card. My sister had ruined this woman's life 2 years before. While she was plotting my downfall for 90 days, she had already practiced on another person. By noon, Paige was in a jail cell. By 1 p.m., my parents had arrived at the police department. By 2 p.m., I was back in my own apartment, staring at the proof I was never meant to find. Bradley had phoned me 30 minutes prior. He told me my parents hired a lawyer for all three of them. The attorney was already attempting to have Paige's confession dismissed. I told him she gave it willingly. He said the lawyer would contest it anyway. Then Bradley brought up something new. He talked about the old case from 2 years ago, the one that involved Rachel Murphy. He insisted that I should investigate it. If Paige had done something like this before, it showed a distinct pattern of behavior. It would mean she was a predator, not just a first-time offender. After the call ended, I opened my laptop. Bradley's statement echoed in my thoughts. People like her do not begin with an act this serious, they work their way up to it. I accessed our family's shared cloud drive and scrolled back through time, beyond 2023, all the way into 2022. And then I saw it, an old backup from an iPad with a date of June 2022. When I opened it, I discovered photos, notes, and a folder with the label Private Journal. My heart sank into my stomach. There was another one. The folder held 30 entries. I started to read them. The first entry was from June 18th. It said everyone at their job loved Rachel Murphy and her incredible designs, and Paige was getting sick of it. She wrote that Rachel had to go. I scrolled further down. An entry from June 25th said she had a plan to get rid of Rachel by framing her for taking company money. On July 20th, she wrote that she had stolen Rachel's password when she left her computer unlocked. The last journal entry was dated August 15th. Paige had written that it was the day she would destroy Rachel. Her plan was to move $85,000 from a client's account into a hidden one using Rachel's personal login. She was confident Rachel would be fired or possibly even go to jail. After that, Paige would finally be the lead coordinator. I felt sick to my stomach. She had dismantled this woman's life 2 years before attempting to dismantle mine. I immediately looked up Rachel Murphy online. An article from August 17th, 2022 appeared first. It reported an event manager named Rachel Murphy was accused of theft for $85,000. The article mentioned the proof against the 28-year-old was immense, but Murphy maintained her innocence, claiming she was set up. A later article from November said the charges were dismissed due to issues with the digital evidence, but the damage was already done. Rachel Murphy's career was in ruins. She was unable to get another job in her industry. I located Rachel's professional page online. Her photo was of a smiling, self-assured woman, but her biography told a sad story. It simply stated she was looking for new opportunities. Her most recent job had ended in August of 2022. The timeline showed a 2-year gap. She had made posts searching for any job at all, but the last one was from 6 months ago. After that, nothing. A public record search gave me her current address. It was a small studio in East Austin, the type of place that rents for around $800 a month. It was the apartment someone gets when their world has collapsed. Paige had systematically destroyed this woman with a cruel, deliberate scheme. And for 2 years, Rachel never knew the real source of her suffering. I phoned Bradley right away. I have the evidence. I explained that Paige had done the very same thing to Rachel Murphy 2 years prior. He asked me to send it all over. Showing this pattern would build a much more solid case against Paige. It would prove her actions were premeditated and she was likely to repeat them. I said I was going to find Rachel. She had a right to know who did this to her. Bradley told me to be cautious. I responded that if Paige set her up, Rachel would want justice as much as I did. I ended the call, took my keys, and started driving. The building was run down, a complete opposite of the polished woman in Rachel's old pictures. At 6 in the evening, I knocked on apartment 2B. I could hear movement and the door cracked open, held by a chain. A weary, thin woman peered through the gap. She had deep dark circles under her eyes and seemed much older than 30. She wanted to know what I needed. My name is Reagan Sutton, I said. 2 years ago, my sister Paige destroyed your life. 3 days ago, she tried it with me. I think we should talk. Rachel released the chain and opened the door. Her apartment was incredibly small, maybe 400 square feet, but it was perfectly clean. This was a space for surviving, not for living. A futon acted as both her couch and her bed. A single hot plate and a small refrigerator made up her kitchen. There was not a television, just a laptop on a tiny table next to a pile of bills. Rachel motioned for me to sit on the futon. She began to offer me coffee, then paused. We both understood it was a luxury she could not spare. I sat while she remained standing, eyeing me with distrust. You said your sister ruined my life, Paige Sutton. I know that name. We worked together at Premier Austin events 2 years ago. I know, I replied. You need to look at this. I pulled up the 2022 journal file on my laptop and turned it toward her. This is Paige's private journal from June to August of 2022. She recorded everything. Rachel's hands were trembling as she scrolled. Her face lost all its color. On day 1, she wrote about me. Rachel Murphy thinks she is so much better than everyone. She kept reading. Day 15. I have a strategy to get Rachel dismissed. Day 25. I have Rachel's laptop password. Her voice broke. Day 30. I am going to use Rachel's login to transfer $85,000. Oh my gosh, she wrote down every single step. She planned this out just like she planned what she did to me, I said gently. Rachel collapsed onto the futon beside me, her gaze glued to the screen. I told them all it was not me. My boss, the police, even my own family, no one believed me. She looked at me, tears streaming down her face. How could they believe me? The proof against me was perfect. My login, the transfer records, my password, my computer. I believe you, I said. Rachel took a sharp breath. She dried her eyes with her hand. Tell me exactly what happened, I encouraged, the whole story. Rachel inhaled deeply. 2 years ago, I was an event manager at Premier Austin Events. I was great at my job. In a single quarter, I brought in 3 major clients for weddings and company events. My manager was thinking about promoting me to senior manager. She paused for a moment. Paige began working there 6 months after me. She seemed nice and pleasant at first, but soon she became fiercely competitive. Any new client I got, she would try to take. Any concept I proposed, she would tear down in front of our managers. She made everything a contest that I had no interest in. Rachel's jaw tightened. Then, in August of 2022, $85,000 disappeared from a client's account. All the digital trails led back to my login. The money was wired to a foreign account I had never heard of. I was fired that same day. The company filed criminal charges against me. I spent my entire life savings on a lawyer. What happened with the case? I asked. The evidence was just overwhelming, Rachel said. My lawyer convinced the DA to drop the case if I returned the money and resigned, but my career was destroyed. Every event planner in Austin knew my name. The accusation always came up on background checks. I sent out 200 applications. I got 2 interviews and 0 offers. She gestured around the tiny room. For 2 years, I have delivered food just to afford this place. My parents disowned me. They told me I was a disgrace to the family. Her voice became barely audible. I lost everything, my career, my savings, my parents, because of Paige. I saw in her the same person I was just 3 days ago, accused, arrested, and completely on my own. But Rachel had no way to prove her innocence. She had been living with the consequences for 2 years while Paige just moved on to her next target. Me. Rachel, I said, I have the evidence that it was Paige. Her admission is right in this journal, and because of what she just did to me, we can get your case reopened. Rachel's eyes widened. Reopen it now, after all this time? It proves a pattern of behavior, I continued. Paige framed you in 2022. She tried to frame me in 2024. The method is identical. Take someone's identity, commit a crime, leave the evidence, destroy the person. When we show this pattern to the DA, they will see she is a serial offender. She is a predator. Rachel was speechless. If we prove she did this, can I get my life back? I am not sure, I replied honestly, but we absolutely have to try. Rachel was silent for several minutes. Then she put her face in her hands. When she looked up, her expression had changed. The exhaustion was still there, but something new was present. It was resolve. What do you need me to do? She asked. Be at the station tomorrow morning, I told her. Give a formal statement. Tell them what happened in 2022. I will provide the journal. Detective Bradley is on my case. He will listen to your account and see how it matches Paige's confession. Do you think they will listen to me this time? Rachel asked. Her voice was a fragile whisper of hope and doubt. They will listen, I promised. It is different now because Paige already confessed to framing someone else. No one will think you're just making up wild stories. You will be victim number 2 in her pattern of crime. Rachel nodded slowly. Okay, I will do it. There is one more thing, I said. When we move forward, Paige's lawyers will come after you. They will say you are lying for payback or trying to profit from my situation. They will try to ruin what is left of your name. Rachel's jaw set. Let them. I have lived with shame for 2 long years. This time, I will be fighting back. I stood up and held out my hand. We will face this together. Rachel rose and took my hand. Her grip was firm. Together. After leaving her apartment, I was heading to my car when my phone rang. It was Detective Bradley. Reagan, there is a problem. Wallace and Margaret posted Paige's bail. It was $500,000. She is free. My stomach dropped. When did this happen? About 20 minutes ago. Her attorney argued she was not a flight risk and was established in the community. I recalled a line from Paige's journal, day 90. Even if Reagan suspects me, she has no proof. But Paige did not know I had her journal. She did not know I had found Rachel, and she had no clue what was coming next. Bradley, I said, make sure Rachel Murphy comes in tomorrow. And I need to talk to the district attorney. We are not charging Paige with a single crime. We are charging her with two. We are going to prove that she is a repeat offender. The next 3 days passed in a blur of police meetings, going over evidence and watching the prosecutor build a case meant to send Paige to prison. On Friday morning, September 20th, Rachel and I sat across from Detective Bradley and District Attorney Patricia Monroe in a conference room at the Travis County DA's office. Monroe was 58, with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun and sharp gray eyes that missed nothing. She had been in charge of major cases in Austin for 2 decades. Bradley warned me she was tough. That was a good thing. We needed someone tough. Rachel recounted her story, giving every single detail. The jealousy, the stolen password, the $85,000 that disappeared, and the fake digital trail across her life, including login records, money transfers, and false invoices, all of it created by Paige. Her voice was steady, but I saw her hands shaking in her lap as she talked about the day she was fired, the day the police showed up at her house, and the day her parents told her she was no longer their child. Monroe heard her out without saying a thing. She did not write any notes. She gave no sign of sympathy. She just watched Rachel with the cold, analytical view of a prosecutor, determining the most effective way to show this to a jury. When Rachel had finished, Monroe leaned back in her seat. The leather of her chair made a faint noise in the still room. Why did you not say you were framed at the time? Rachel's voice was strong, but her hands were trembling. I tried to. Nobody listened to me. The evidence was simply too strong. I pushed the 2022 journal to her side of the table. This is the reason. Monroe read it in silence. Her face remained blank, but her jaw muscle tightened. I saw her eyes sweep over the page, absorbing every calculated step Paige had written. When she finally raised her head, her look was freezing. This was premeditated and deliberate. Mrs. Murphy, we are reopening your investigation. Rachel gasped. Tears began to roll down her cheeks. Thank you. Monroe did not smile. She simply closed the journal and gave it back to me. We are going to need the original document and whatever digital proof you have. On Saturday, September 21st, the district attorney's office established a command center. A huge whiteboard took up an entire wall. Two timelines were drawn, one in blue ink and the other in red. 2022 Rachel Murphy. June, jealousy starts. July, password stolen. August, $85,000 taken, Rachel framed. 2024 Reagan Sutton. June, jealousy starts. July, driver's license stolen. September, attempted murder, Reagan framed. Monroe stood in front of the board with her arms crossed. It is the exact same method. This is her signature move. Bradley agreed. We can charge her with a pattern of criminal behavior. The punishments will be much worse. I want it all, Monroe announced. Every journal entry, every financial document, and every single person who can testify. I opened my laptop to present the evidence I had collected all week. There were two journals from 2022 and 2024 that detailed 90 days of my sister's planning against me and 30 days against Rachel. I laid out the financial trail, including Bitcoin receipts, payments to forgers for fake documents, and transfers to Rachel's overseas accounts. The digital footprint was just as clear, with browser histories, recovered text messages, cloud files, and login records. I also provided a witness list. It included Rachel Murphy and Jennifer Fisher as soon as she was healthy enough to speak. Emma Fisher's name was there for a statement about the crash suitable for a child. I also listed Officer Kyle Stevens, the man who took me into custody. Even the Uber driver who saw the Range Rover speed away was on my list. Monroe's assistant, a sharp young lawyer named Vincent Shaw, took notes on a legal pad. He looked about 30, dressed in a well-tailored suit that fit his intelligent demeanor. He was quiet, but I saw him mentally piecing together the narrative for the jury. When I finished, Monroe turned to Bradley. How solid is the confession from 2024? It's unbreakable, Bradley assured her. She gave it freely, with no coercion. Paige completely fell apart in the interview. She confessed to everything on video. Her exact words were, I wanted her to hurt. I did not care if the officer's wife died. A small smile touched Monroe's lips. Perfect. Let us make sure she pays for this. On Sunday, September 22nd, Monroe had us come to her office one more time. Rachel sat beside me while Bradley stood near the door. Monroe had a thick file on her desk. She opened it. This is the official list of charges against Paige Sutton. She started to read them aloud. For the crimes in 2024, she faces 2 counts of attempted murder for Jennifer Pfizer and Emma Pfizer. The charges read like a list of every major felony: aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, leaving the scene of an accident, child endangerment. There was also identity theft and obstruction of justice. Monroe flipped the page. The crimes from 2022 were equally severe: embezzlement of $85,000, wire fraud, the theft of Rachel Murphy's identity, and computer fraud. She turned another page. We also have enhancements for engaging in organized criminal activity. Monroe finally raised her eyes to meet mine. With all these charges, Paige is looking at 25 to 30 years in a state prison. She will not be eligible for parole for at least 15 years. The weight of that sentence settled in the room. If Paige ever got out, she would be a woman in her 50s. The air grew heavy, and I heard Rachel draw a quick, sharp breath next to me. "What about my parents?" I asked, and my voice sounded distant and strange. Monroe's professional expression softened slightly. "Wallace and Margaret will be charged separately," she said. "They face conspiracy, filing a false police report, and making a fake 911 call. If they agree to testify against Paige, they might only get probation. And if they refuse?" She hesitated. "They will likely get 2 to 5 years each." I gave a slow nod. They made their choice. Monroe shut the folder. "The arraignment is on Monday at 9 in the morning. Paige will enter her plea then. I can guarantee you she will plead not guilty." After that meeting, we immediately started to prepare for the trial. Monroe looked at both of us. "I will need you two to testify." Rachel and I glanced at each other and she nodded with determination. "We will do it." As we left the district attorney's building, the afternoon sun felt like a blast furnace. The temperature in Austin was still 95 degrees, and you could see heat shimmering off the blacktop. The air was thick with the smell of hot asphalt and car fumes. Rachel and I walked to the parking structure in complete silence. We did not speak until we reached my car. She turned to me then. "Reagan," she began, her voice thick with emotion, "I just want to thank you for believing in me, for fighting for me." I looked at this woman whose entire life had been upended by my sister. In that instant, something inside me shifted. This was not just about clearing my own name anymore. It was about making sure Paige could never destroy another person's life again. "It is not finished," I told her. "Paige will plead not guilty on Monday. That is when the real work starts." Rachel nodded. "I will be ready." But I kept my biggest fear to myself. I was terrified that Paige was free on bail. She knew I was the one who exposed her. She knew about the journals, about Rachel, and the entire case. Paige Sutton had nothing more to lose, and a person with nothing to lose is the most dangerous person in the world. I thought about what she wrote on day 90. She has no proof, but that was no longer true. And Paige knew I had everything. That meant she would either disappear or come after me, and I could not decide which was worse. On Monday morning, September 25th, I took a seat in the gallery of the Travis County Courthouse. I was there to see my sister plead not guilty to 14 separate criminal charges. The courtroom was packed. The press filled the back rows, their pens scribbling furiously. On the prosecutor's side, I saw Jennifer Fisher's family. My own parents sat directly behind Paige, flanking their lawyer. But I was completely alone. Paige entered the room in a tasteful cream-colored dress and heels, not a standard prison uniform. She was still a free woman. The judge, a serious-looking woman in her 60s named Catherine Walsh, peered down from her high bench. "Paige Sutton, you are charged with 14 counts," she started. "2 counts of attempted murder, aggravated assault, felony hit and run, child endangerment, identity theft, and obstruction of justice." The list kept going: embezzlement, wire fraud, computer fraud, and the theft of Rachel Murphy's identity, and finally, organized criminal activity. It took a full 30 seconds to read them all. Each charge felt like a punch to the gut. "How do you plead?" Paige's voice was clear and strong. "Not guilty, Your Honor." A wave of cold fear washed over me. She was going to fight every step of the way. District Attorney Monroe stood. "Your Honor, the state moves to revoke bail. The defendant poses a clear danger to the witnesses, especially her sister Reagan Sutton." A man named Gregory Palmer stood up. "Your Honor, my client has complied with all her bail conditions. She is not a flight risk. She is an established member of this community and had a spotless record before this." Judge Walsh considered Paige for a moment. "Bail will continue, but Miss Sutton, you are ordered to have zero contact with Reagan Sutton or Rachel Murphy. Any violation means you go straight to jail. Is that clear?" "Yes, Your Honor. The trial date is set for December 2nd, 2024. Court is adjourned." The gavel banged loudly. I stood up and tried to blend into the departing crowd. but in the hallway, I ran right into them. Paige, Wallace, and Margaret were huddled with their lawyer, already strategizing. Wallace spotted me and started walking toward me. Reagan, we need to discuss this as a family. I did not stop walking. I have nothing to discuss with you. My mother's voice trembled. Please, sweetheart. Paige made a mistake. She is your sister. That made me stop. I turned around to face them all. She tried to frame me for a crime that would have sent me to prison for 10 years. That is not a mistake. That is a calculated act of destruction. Paige stepped forward, her eyes cold and empty. You will regret this, Reagan. You are the one tearing this family apart. I did not tear it apart, I said, my voice barely a whisper. You did, 90 days ago. A sheriff's deputy moved between us. Miss Sutton, you need to remember the no contact order. Step away now. Paige held my gaze for another second before turning and leaving with our parents. I stood in the marble corridor and watched them walk away. In that moment, I knew I would never speak to them as my family again. The following 3 weeks became a blur of intense trial preparations. During the first week, I was with Monroe's team from morning until night. They taught me how to handle myself on the witness stand, answer only the question asked, do not volunteer information. The defense will try to paint you as vengeful, so do not lose your temper. We spent hours going over the evidence. We reviewed my recording from the night of the hit and run. We went through the journal pages, which were now full of highlights and sticky notes. We traced the financial records of every dollar Page had moved. It was every single piece of the puzzle I had worked so hard to find. Then, in the second week, Jennifer Fisher came home from the hospital. 6 weeks after the crash, she was finally able to walk and talk well enough to give her testimony. Monroe set up a meeting for us. In person, Jennifer was much thinner than in her pictures. She wore a sling on her left arm, but her eyes were sharp and clear. Thank you, she said simply, for finding out what really happened. I was at a loss for words. I am just so sorry that you and your daughter went through this. It was not your fault. She reached over with her good hand and gently squeezed mine. You made her stop. That is what is important. Her little girl, Emma Fisher, who was only 7, was still too deeply traumatized to appear in court. To protect Emma, Monroe arranged for her deposition to be recorded on video. She was in a comfortable room, and a trauma specialist asked the questions gently. I could only bring myself to watch the recording a single time. I saw that little girl talk about the crash, the airbag, and her mother's screams. I could never watch it again. In the third week, Palmer started filing motions to get evidence dismissed. First, he argued the journals were a violation of privacy. Judge Walsh rejected it, confirming my access to the family cloud account was legal. Then he attempted to have all the iCloud evidence thrown out. That motion was also rejected. After that, Rachel gave her deposition. I watched from behind a one-way mirror as she told her story with calm consistency. She recalled the events of 2022 without any trouble. Palmer's assistant questioned her for 2 hours, trying to find a crack in her story, but she never faltered. On October 15th, Monroe called me in for my final meeting before the trial. She told me I would be on the witness stand for 4 to 6 hours. Palmer will go after your credibility. He will claim you created the journals because you were jealous. You need to stay perfectly calm. I will. He will call your access to the iCloud account a form of hacking. We know that is not true, but he will want to create doubt for the jury. You must be as solid as a rock. I nodded. Monroe leaned back in her chair. Reagan, I have been putting criminals like her away for 20 years. And in all that time, I have never seen someone document their own crimes this way. Most of them try to cover their trail. Paige wrote about her offenses as if she were bragging about them. That is our biggest advantage. Her own writing is what will send her to prison. What if the jury decides the journals are not real? Then we show them her confession on video. We have Paige on camera screaming that she wanted me to suffer, that she did not care if the other person in the crash died. You cannot fake that level of pure anger. She got to her feet. Go get some sleep. The trial begins on Monday, December 2nd at 9 in the morning. We are going to put her away for good. The night before the trial started, sleep was impossible. I just looked out at the city lights, picturing Paige's defiant face. She honestly thought she was going to win. Palmer's strategy was obvious. He was going to attack my character, trying to show me as a bitter sister who faked evidence for revenge. But there was one piece of evidence he could never explain. It was the sound of Paige's own voice on that video confession. I had replayed that video countless times to brace myself for seeing it in the courtroom. Each time I heard Paige yell that she wanted me to suffer, my own determination grew stronger. Tomorrow, 12 strangers would hear it for themselves. They would see her personal journals. They would hear Jennifer Fisher testify. They would listen to Rachel Murphy talk about 2 years of torment. And then they would hear my story of how I found the truth, one painful discovery at a time. My sister's entire future hung in the balance, 30 years in prison or her freedom. Paige Sutton's trial began on a freezing Monday, December 2nd, 2024. 5 days felt like 5 years. The courtroom was packed every single day. Reporters, victim advocates, and curious locals from Austin filled the seats. I sat in the front row for the prosecution with Rachel next to me. On the other side, our parents, Wallace and Margaret, sat right behind Paige and her lawyer. We never made eye contact, not even once. Judge Catherine Walsh presided, just as serious as she was at the first hearing. 12 jurors were seated. There were 7 women and 5 men from their early 20s to late 60s. These regular people held my sister's life in their hands. The district attorney Monroe rose to give his opening statement. He called this a story of jealousy, meticulous planning, and utter ruin. Paige Sutton took 3 months to frame her own sister for a crime. 2 years before, she had already destroyed another woman's life completely. He said this is her pattern. She is a predator who preys on successful women out of envy and destroys them without remorse. The evidence will show Paige Sutton is guilty of all charges. Then, her lawyer Palmer stood looking polished and sure of himself. He claimed this was simply a case of a family torn by conflict. He said that Reagan Sutton, a technology expert, had the motive and skill to fake digital proof. He alleged I hacked my sister's private accounts, invaded her privacy, and invented a story to avoid facing justice for my own crime. The defense will show there is reasonable doubt, which is all you need. If any doubt remains, you must declare her not guilty. On the second day, I took the witness stand. Monroe had me walk through the timeline, my arrest, my missing license, the investigation, and the journals. That was 4 hours of direct testimony. Then Palmer got up to cross-examine me. He asked, Miss Sutton, do you admit you read your sister's journal without consent? I replied that I accessed a family cloud account which I am the legal manager of. He shot back. How very convenient that you stumbled upon proof of your sister's guilt. I stated the journals are in Paige's own handwriting. Computer data confirms each entry was made on the date shown. I did not invent any of it. He challenged me, you work in cybersecurity, you could alter that data. I said I did not. He answered, but you had the ability. I looked straight at the jury. I had the ability, but I did not do it, and the forensic report proves that. Palmer grilled me for another hour, but he failed to rattle me. On day 3, it was Rachel's turn. She shared her story. The setup in 2022, the stolen password, the $85,000. She explained how for 2 years she was broke and could not get a job. Her voice never wavered. Palmer's questions only lasted 30 minutes. He could not shake her either. Jennifer Fisher testified next. She was thinner and more reserved, but her resolve was strong. She spoke of the car crash, the violent impact, and waking up in a hospital. Her daughter suffered a concussion. Then she discovered the collision was intentional. I believed it was an accident, she said, until I found out it was planned. I was a target because my husband is a detective. My daughter and I were just collateral damage. Her voice broke on the final word, and 2 jurors quickly wiped away tears. Day 4 was reserved for the confession video. Monroe rose to his feet. Your Honor, the prosecution presents Exhibit 47, which is the interrogation of Paige Sutton from September 19, 2024. Palmer immediately objected, claiming the confession was coerced. Judge Walsh denied the objection. The defendant was not under arrest at the time. She was being interviewed as a witness, so a Miranda warning was not necessary. The confession is admissible. The courtroom lights dimmed. A large screen flickered on at the front of the room. I saw a Paige on the screen sitting in that same interrogation room. The video began partway through our conversation with my voice sounding calm and icy. Did you target Jennifer Fisher for a reason? Paige's voice rose in anger. I did not give a damn if that police officer's wife died. She was simply in my path. This was always about you. A dead silence fell over the courtroom. A woman on the jury gasped, covering her mouth. Another juror leaned far back, his face a mask of pure disgust. As the video continued, Paige shrieked, I wanted you to hurt. I wanted you to feel what it is like to lose everything you have ever loved. Then you could see the exact moment she knew what she had just admitted. Her face went white. Wait, that is not what I meant to say. The screen went black. The lights came up. Paige just stared at the table, her hands trembling. She refused to look at anyone. Palmer stood, rushing to control the damage. Your Honor, my client was experiencing extreme emotional distress. The confession was given freely, Monroe countered. Miss Sutton had that outburst entirely on her own. No one forced or threatened her. She spoke the truth, and the jury has now heard it with their own ears. Judge Walsh gave a slight nod. Proceed. On day 5, it was time for closing arguments. Monroe faced the jury directly. You have seen her journals, which show 90 days of careful planning. You have heard her own words. I wanted her to suffer. You have seen all the proof. Two women, two separate frame ups, and one person responsible. Paige Sutton is guilty and she must face the full consequences of the law. Palmer stood for his final plea. He spoke of reasonable doubt. That is the only thing you need. Can you say with complete certainty that those journals were not altered? That her confession was not forced out of her? If there is any doubt in your mind, you are required to find her not guilty. The jury filed out of the room at 2:15 in the afternoon. Rachel and I stood waiting in the tense hallway. Bradley came to stand with us, his arms folded against the wall. How long do you think they will be? Rachel whispered. It might be hours, but it could also take days. I had no answer for her. At 6:30 that evening, a court deputy appeared. The jury has returned. It had been just 4 hours. We all returned to our seats in the courtroom. Paige looked like a statue between her lawyers. Wallace and Margaret seemed to have aged a decade in just 5 days. Judge Walsh came in. We all stood and then sat again. Has the jury come to a verdict? The foreman, a man in his 50s with gray hair and glasses, got to his feet. We have, Your Honor. On the charge of the attempted murder of Jennifer Fisher, what is your finding? Guilty. A sob escaped from Margaret. The foreman continued reading down the list. Attempted murder of Emma Fisher. Guilty, aggravated assault with a dangerous weapon. Guilty, felony hit and run. Guilty, endangering a child. Guilty, identity theft of Reagan Sutton. Guilty, obstruction of justice. Guilty. He went through all 14 charges, each time the same word. Guilty, guilty, guilty. Paige's face completely crumbled. Her hands were clutching the table so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Palmer rested a hand on her shoulder, but she gave no sign of noticing. Judge Walsh's voice sliced through the tension in the room. Miss Sutton, you have been found guilty on every single count. This court will sentence you on December 20th, which is 2 weeks from now. Take the defendant into custody. Two deputies moved toward Paige. She rose on unsteady legs. They cuffed her hands behind her back. As they walked her to a side door, she spun around and stared right at me. All the fight was gone from her eyes. There was only emptiness. Her lips formed words. The courtroom was too loud for me to make them out, but I could read them clearly. I hate you. I gave no reply. There was nothing more to say. The door clicked shut. Paige was gone. On December 20th, 2024, it was time for sentencing. The courtroom seemed colder than before, or perhaps it was the feeling of finality. 2 weeks had gone by since the verdict. Paige was at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit, her hands cuffed. The expensive clothes were gone. The performance was over. Gregory Palmer was beside her, but he had nothing left to argue. Judge Catherine Walsh gazed down from her high bench. Before I deliver the sentence, this court will hear from the victims. Jennifer Fisher went first. Her voice was strong, but her hands held the podium in a tight grip. My daughter Emma is 7 years old. She wakes up screaming from nightmares every night. The sound of a car horn makes her panic. Paige Sutton did not just hit our vehicle. She smashed directly into our family. My husband Robert is a detective. He is used to seeing the worst sides of people, but he was not prepared to find his own family bleeding at a crash scene. Paige Sutton does not deserve any mercy because she did not show any to us. Rachel Murphy was next. She was much thinner than she was 9 months ago, but she stood taller. 2 years ago, Paige Sutton destroyed my career, my good name, and my family relationships. I lost my entire life. I spent 2 years believing I had done something to deserve that I must have made a horrible mistake. But I was wrong. Paige ruined me simply because she was jealous. Your Honor, she has to be stopped. If she is ever released, she will just do this to someone else. Then it was my turn to speak. I walked to the podium and I looked at Judge Walsh, avoiding eye contact with Paige. Paige is my sister. I spent my whole life protecting her, and she repaid me by trying to send me to prison for 10 years. But this is not about me now. This is about ensuring Paige can never, ever ruin another life. Your Honor, I am asking for the maximum possible sentence. Judge Walsh fixed her eyes on Paige. Miss Sutton, please rise. Paige got to her feet and her chains made a soft rattling noise. The judge's voice was cold and firm. I have reviewed all the evidence, every report, and the statements from your victims. What you did was not a simple mistake. It was calculated, it was planned, and it was cruel. You detailed your 90-day plan to destroy your own sister in a journal. And before that, you destroyed Rachel Murphy's life for the smallest reason possible, simple jealousy. She took a breath. You have not shown a single sign of remorse. Your confession was not filled with regret, it was filled with anger. The law provides for harsher sentences when there is a clear pattern of criminal behavior. I intend to use those harsher sentences now. For the charges of attempted murder, I sentence you to 15 years for each count, and those sentences will be served back to back. For the embezzlement and fraud charges related to Rachel Murphy, you will serve an additional 8 years. When combined with the other charges, your total sentence comes to 30 years in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. You will not be eligible for parole until you have served 15 years. Page's knees buckled. A cry came from Margaret in the audience. Wallace sat motionless, his face the color of ash. Judge Walsh's gavel struck the wood with a loud crack. Bailiff, take custody of the defendant. Two deputies gripped Page's arms and guided her to the door. This time, she did not look back, and I felt nothing, no relief, no happiness, just a hollow space. It was truly over. 9 months later, in September of 2025, my life was completely different. It was so much better. I felt like myself again. I saw my own reflection in the large window of my new corner office at SecureNet Solutions. My official new title was Director of Cybersecurity Architecture, and my salary was $230,000 a year, which was a good raise from $178,000. I used last year's $52,000 bonus for two very special purposes. First, I created a $100,000 fund to pay for Emma Pfizer's college education and her therapy. Second, a payment of $214,000 covered all of Jennifer Fisher's remaining medical expenses. She sent me a card that I keep on my desk. It says that I saved her family 2 times, once from Paige and then again from crushing debt. Just a short walk down the hall, Rachel Murphy now has her own office. I offered her a job 6 months ago as the senior event coordinator, and her public record has been wiped clean. The district attorney cleared her name the day after Paige's sentencing. Rachel has already saved up $25,000. She found a great apartment in South Congress and is slowly reconnecting with her parents. Just last week, she shared the news that she received another promotion to lead event strategist. She said she never thought she would get her career back. I reminded her that she had earned every single bit of her success. Jennifer and Emma are both healing. Jennifer has returned to her work at Dell Children's Hospital. Emma has therapy twice a week, and the nightmares are not as frequent. She is now in second grade, has made new friends, and is smiling a lot more. About 3 months ago, Robert Fisher gave me a call just to say thank you for everything I had done. I said I was just grateful they were okay. He told me they were okay thanks to me. Wallace and Margaret both pleaded guilty to obstructing justice. They each got 2 years of probation, 500 hours of community service, and $80,000 fines. Their large Westlake home was sold for $3.1 million. After paying $425,000 to Page's lawyers and $200,000 for theirs, they downsized to a small two-bedroom condo in North Austin. I visit them once a year on Thanksgiving. It is always strained, formal, and incredibly cold. We do not talk about Paige. She is at the Mountain View unit in Gatesville, Texas, a women's prison about 2 hours from here. She sent a brief letter 4 months ago containing only 3 lines. It read, "I am sorry, I was wrong." The final sentence asked if I would please write her back. I threw the letter away. I did not have any hate for her. I had no feelings at all, which feels much worse. Today, I am at a coffee shop on 2nd Street with Rachel. Warm September light is pouring through the glass. Rachel is beaming as she tells me about her latest promotion to senior event strategist. I told her she earned it. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand gently. She said she never properly thanked me for having faith in her and for saving her life. I replied that we rescued each other. We raised our coffee cups in a small toast. Rachel's phone buzzed with a reminder for a client meeting in 20 minutes. I told her to run along, I would get the check. She hugged me and asked about dinner this week, and I told her, of course. I stayed for a minute by myself, just gazing out at the city of Austin. Only 1 year ago, I was under arrest for a crime I did not commit. My own sister tried to ruin me, but she forgot something critical about me. My name is Reagan Sutton. My work is solving problems, and the hardest problem I ever faced was my own family. My phone vibrated with an email about a new client. A logistics company down in Dallas had a data breach. I left some cash on the table and stepped out into the bright September afternoon. I was finally truly free. I was not just free from the legal charges, but free from a family that never really loved me. And for the first time in my life, I felt I was exactly where I should be. For anyone listening to my story, please take this to heart. I was blessed with the mind to uncover the truth, the resilience to defend myself, and the courage to choose right over family. There were 3 distinct times I could have simply surrendered. First, after finding the journal entry. Second, after seeing Rachel's deep suffering. And third, when the confession video played in court. But I kept pushing forward because some battles are worth risking absolutely everything. Looking back, I have no regrets about exposing Paige, but I do regret not noticing the red flags much earlier. Her jealousy was always there, simmering beneath a constant need to be better. She always shifted blame for her own failures. Betrayal from a relative does not come with a dramatic movie monologue. It quietly builds, disguised as normal sibling rivalry, until one day you are in handcuffs because your sister tried to destroy your life. Please learn from my experience. Do not wait until you are framed for a serious crime to realize that family revenge is not just a dramatic story, it is a real thing and it can break you. So, this is my advice: always listen to your instincts. If someone in your family makes you feel small, envious, or afraid, you must create boundaries to protect yourself, even if they are family. Betrayal by a loved one causes the deepest pain. They are aware of your passwords, your routines, and every single one of your vulnerabilities. If they choose to use that knowledge against you, you may not get another opportunity to recover. I almost did not get one. This whole ordeal showed me that sharing blood does not guarantee loyalty. It showed me that the very people you would do anything for can be the ones who want to hurt you the most. So if this story has resonated with you, please leave your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever been let down by someone you implicitly trusted? Please share this video with anyone who needs this message and subscribe to the channel. The future stories I will tell will dig even deeper into the dark side of human nature. Thank you for listening all the way to the end. I also want to mention that stories on this channel may contain fictional elements for educational purposes. If this type of material is not for you, please feel free to browse for other videos you might prefer. Please stay safe.